Vincent was a famous hunter in the area, living with his beautiful wife, Olena. But sadly, the two were unable to have children. However, one night, Vincent kept hearing a faint whimpering sound coming from the stables. At first, he thought it was just some wild animal, but when he got there with his axe, Vincent was stunned to find a fair-skinned, blonde-haired baby wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in the middle of the stables. Several years passed, and the child grew up. With blonde hair and blue eyes, he was incredibly beautiful and adorable. The boy was named Aryan Chiron, and he is our main character. Vincent and Olena always considered him their own precious son, their treasure. Every day Vincent went into the forest, he would bring his son along. While he chopped wood, Chiron would be engrossed in reading the magic books his father bought for him. Theirs was a warm and happy family. But the other children in the village didn't seem to like Chiron very much. The reason was pretty ridiculous. He was always engrossed in his books, plus he was very skinny and looked as delicate as a girl, nothing like Vincent's tall and burly frame. The village gossips would often whisper that Vincent and his wife had just found Chiron somewhere. And of course, because of that, the other children in the village knew about it too. Even though it was true that Chiron was adopted, Vincent couldn't stand people gossiping about the child he considered his treasure. Vincent always felt it was his fault that Chiron was ostracized by the other village kids. Of course, he couldn't just rush in and give each of them a beating, so to make up for his guilt, he could only take his son on frequent trips to broaden his horizons. The next morning, Vincent took his son to the city of Chris, on the outskirts of the Tomia kingdom. This was Chiron's first time in a city. He was dazzled by its luxury and bustling energy. Vincent still had some business to take care of, so he had the carriage stop in front of a fruit stand owned by an acquaintance named Ma-an. He told his son to stay put until he got back, even though Chiron was usually very well behaved. But since it was his first time in the city, Vincent repeatedly warned his son not to wander into any shady alleys or run into any nobles. Only then did he drive the carriage away. Chiron stayed at the fruit stall and tried to make himself useful by writing a sign for Ma-an. The man seemed surprised that a country boy like him knew how to read and write. He also seemed very smart and clever. As Ma-an was admiring the beautiful child, Chiron suddenly asked curiously, "Mr. Ma-an, sir, do you know about magic?" "What, law? No, I said magic!" Chiron excitedly held up the big magic book Vincent had bought for him. Ma-an chuckled. Kids will be kids, always interested in such fantastical things. Things like dragons, heroes, and sorcerers. But seeing the hopeful sparkle in Chiron's eyes, Ma-an didn't have the heart to disappoint him, so he pointed to the alley in front of them. "I don't know much about magic myself, but there are a lot of books about it over there." Chiron followed Ma-an's finger, and his eyes immediately lit up. Beyond the alley was a large bookstore. With Ma-an's permission, he immediately dashed towards it. However, after he entered the bookstore, Chiron was stopped by the haughty owner. She wouldn't let him touch the books on the shelves, saying, "These expensive books aren't for poor brats like you." Just then, the shop welcomed a distinguished customer. The shopkeeper called him head butler, though it was unclear from which prestigious family. But while she was busy with him, Chiron quickly flipped through a few books on the shelf. He discovered their contents weren't very interesting at all. As he listlessly left the shop, he happened to see a man walking by carrying a crate of books. Chiron was a book lover, so he immediately ran after the man. But what shocked him next was that the man brazenly dumped the entire crate of books into a pile of trash. "So this is where Dad gets my books." Chiron stood there, stunned for a few seconds. Then, he walked over to the trash pile and carefully began picking up the books one by one. Just then, the sound of laughter and chatter reached his ears, and he turned his head. He saw two noble girls chatting happily, each holding a book. Chiron couldn't help but wonder what was so different between them and him. Why did Dad warn me not to run into nobles? And why could they freely read any book they wanted, but he couldn't? Lost in these thoughts, Chiron unconsciously started following the two girls. But before he could catch up, a tall guard stopped him. "Hey, kid, this isn't a place for the likes of you to be loitering. Beyond this gate is the nobles' district. Where are your parents, kid?"
My father is nearby," Chiron answered, flustered.
Just then, another guard walked over. He took one look at Chiron and found him suspicious, since he didn't look like the local children. They figured Chiron was either an orphan or working for some thieves, so they tried to drag him away for questioning. But quick as a flash, he slipped out of his coat and escaped. Chiron hid behind some bushes, his hair a mess and his clothes filthy. Still, he felt lucky he hadn't been caught. Just as he was about to grab his shoes and head back to Mr. Ma-An's, Shirin heard a voice from behind a large wall. All right, now we shall discuss the topic. What is magic? No, headmaster, show us some fire breathing, a few people replied with great excitement. Shirin looked up at the wall, which was 2 or 3 times his height, and of course he couldn't see a thing. Wait a minute. Could this be a magic academy? A powerful wave of excitement washed over him. Shirin pressed his ear against the wall, listening intently. Inside, the man they called the headmaster was continuing to question his students. He asked what the most important thing was when learning magic. Some said it was knowledge, while others said it was diligence. Some argued that the most important thing was money, but still, no one had the correct answer. Shirin, listening intently, finally heard the headmaster's reply. The most important thing in learning magic is insight. The noble students inside, who were all around his age, looked completely dumbfounded when the headmaster mentioned insight. What is that, sir? The headmaster didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked a question in return. Is there anyone here who doesn't know what 1 + 1 equals? Who wouldn't know that? It's 2, of course, the students chattered. Then can any of you explain why it equals 2? The headmaster asked again. The students looked at each other, but none of them could answer. That strange feeling you have right now, that is insight. There was a time when people didn't know that 1 + 1 equals 2, and many scholars had to work tirelessly just to prove it. But even without solid proof, we still understand that 1 + 1 equals 2, don't we? That's because it's a law that has always existed in the world. It's also why we don't need to learn it. We automatically understand and accept it. And magic is the same. It has existed in this world from the very beginning. We can feel it and accept it through our own insight. That is why it's more important than knowledge or hard work. The headmaster explained it all at once. The children inside the academy still hadn't fully processed what he said, but Shirin, eavesdropping from the outside, could feel his heart pounding. Thump, thump, thump. The most important thing in learning magic wasn't money or noble status, but insight. That meant a child like him could also become a great mage, right? At this thought, Shirin was both excited and nervous, his heart nearly leaping out of his chest when he heard the headmaster's voice ask, "The child behind that wall? I want to hear your thoughts." Shirin jumped. He never thought he'd be discovered through such a thick wall. Should he run away now or answer the question? Especially since he looked so dirty and ragged. Shirin was afraid that the headmaster and the children inside would be just like the bookstore owner or those 2 guards. They'd look down on him for being poor and dirty. But he was also afraid that if he passed up this chance, he would regret it for the rest of his life. And so, with some great burst of motivation, Shirin used his small body to climb, step by step, up that wall. He truly looked ragged, but his eyes were shining brightly. Shirin saw the headmaster of the Magic Academy sitting under a tree with a few children. The man had a very gentle appearance, not at all like the bookstore owner or the guards. As soon as he saw Shirin, he spoke first. "Hello, little one. Did you come here to play with me?" That noble headmaster's name was Miro Anpheus, a level 4 mage and the founder of the Anpheus Magic Academy. Shirin used all his strength to jump down from the wall. Then, he slowly walked forward. The children sitting around Anpheus were all nobles, clean and well-dressed, a stark contrast to Shirin. A few of them took one look at his appearance, knew he was just a commoner and bluntly told him to go away. But Headmaster Anpheus was not like that. "It's all right, come here. Was there something this old man said that caught your interest?" Headmaster Anpheus's gentle demeanor made Shirin feel much less insecure. Although he was still quite timid, he dared to say what he wanted. I want to see magic. I've only ever seen it in books, never with my own eyes." Before Anpheus could even reply, the students surrounding him started clamoring. They called Shirin a liar, saying, how could a commoner possibly know how to read? He knew his words held no weight here, so he bowed his head low, pleading, "Please, sir, any spell will do. I just want to witness magic with my own eyes." Anpheus chuckled. "Ha ha, that's simple enough. I'll show you all a spell that can create wind." No sooner had Anpheus finished speaking than a strong gust of wind blew, lifting Shirin into the sky. It wasn't just him. The children around the headmaster were also blown into the air, but every one of them seemed to be enjoying it. Only Shirin was both panicked and confused. After reaching a certain height, he and the other children began to fall. While they still looked excited, Shirin's heart was about to leap out of his chest from fear. This was the first time in his life he had ever been in free fall, and from such a terrifying height, no less. Shirin felt like he was about to be smashed to pieces. He was so scared he squeezed his eyes shut. A long moment passed before Sharon no longer heard the wind whistling past his ears, only the giggling of the other children. Only then did he dare to open his eyes, finding himself hovering just about 1 meter off the ground. The Magic Academy students were teasing him for being such a coward, and the headmaster, Anpheus, seeing this, couldn't help but let out a hearty laugh. "So what do you think? That is magic." Chiron landed safely, but his heart was still pounding from the fear. So this was what magic really was. It was far too profound, beyond the understanding the books had offered him. What exactly is magic, headmaster?" Siren still hadn't recovered from the shock. Anpheus stroked his long beard, seeming to search for a simple example to explain it to the boy. But Siron, too impatient, urged him on. "Please, just tell me the truth." His voice was quite loud, and to an outsider it would seem as if Siren was being rude to the headmaster. The noble students were stunned to hear it because no one had ever dared to raise their voice to Anpheus like that, not even the teachers at the school. They were certain Anpheus would fly into a rage and punish Siren. But when he saw the boy's intelligent face and bright eyes, Anpheus couldn't bring himself to be angry. "Haha, if you're that eager to know, then I shall explain. It's a little complicated, you see." He stroked his beard as he explained to Siren what true magic really was. "It is something that lies beyond common sense. In other words, it is an expansion of the mind to discover the truth of the world. It's something unreal. But could it be, because of that, it's actually closer to the truth?" Siren suddenly asked, unable to hide the excitement on his face. "Because what Siron had just said was something that not even the children from noble families here had realized on their own. "Did you read that in a book?" "No, sir. But I saw similarities among many books. So many ideas from great people were considered absurd, and were shunned. But in the end, they all had to accept that information as a newly discovered truth. So, does that mean the real truth is hidden inside those things that seem absurd? That's what I thought." As he listened to the boy, Anpheus nodded continuously. It seemed he was very pleased with this bright, intelligent child. Despite his difficult circumstances, he still tried his best to absorb and filter the scarce information available to him, to truly understand the problem. It was just a shame that he was a commoner. In the end, his resources could never compare to those of these noble children. To help Siron understand magic better, Anpheus called over a pink-haired girl named Sumin and asked her to enter the spiritual world. He then took a handful of coins from his pocket and asked Sumin to guess how many he was holding. Without a moment's hesitation, Sumin immediately answered with the number 6. And surprisingly, her answer was completely correct. Chiron was astonished, 100,000 questions racing through his mind. Anpheus seemed to guess what he was thinking, so he began to explain that when a mage concentrates, their mind becomes sharp enough to perceive everything around them. Even exceptional mages can count the leaves on a tree from a great distance. This is called a state of extreme mental sensitivity, or the spiritual world I just explained. Anpheus continued to change the number of coins in his hand, and this time Sumin still guessed correctly. A mage who can enter the spiritual world perceives the outside world using a supernatural ability, and eventually they can even dominate reality itself. It's not limited to small things like counting coins. They also have the ability to sense an entire situation as it unfolds right before their eyes. This is the basic skill that Anpheus wants Siren to achieve, if he wants to become a mage, because not everyone can enter this state of the spiritual world. First, you need to be able to sense yourself. Try practicing in a quiet place after that. You must shatter the stray thoughts in your mind. When you can do that, a new world will be illuminated for you to explore. Do you understand what I mean? So, you mean if I can't sense myself, then I won't be able to clear my thoughts? Siren asked again. Anpheus, continually surprised by Siren's questions, told him to try and sense himself right here and now. After all, if Siren couldn't do it, then he would have no aptitude for learning magic anyway. But what exactly is the self? Siren began to search for the answer to that question. The brain is just an organ, while the senses and the reality he perceived could not possibly go beyond the concept of the brain. Siren didn't have to understand its meaning, but rather feel it. And so, after quite a long while, Siren opened his eyes. In front of him were still Headmaster Anpheus and the other students. But something seemed different. Anpheus, his eyes full of anticipation, asked, "What did you sense?" Siren's whole body was drenched in sweat. He answered, "Sound, sir. I heard all the sounds." The children burst out laughing. Of course you'd hear sounds. Anpheus showed no reaction, but he seemed quite disappointed. He figured Siren couldn't do it, just as he had initially predicted, because what happens inside the spiritual world is in another dimension. There, one perceives events with entirely different senses, like with synesthesia, a neurological condition where the brain processes information using multiple senses at once. In that state, a person can smell sounds, taste light, and feel a landscape through their skin. But Siron had just said he heard sound. That proved he hadn't entered the spiritual world at all. In any case, it wasn't something just anyone could do. Anpheus slowly stood up and patted Siren's head reassuringly. Very good. If you continue to practice, in the future, you'll be able to hear even more sounds. With that, Anpheus turned to his students and said, All right, this special lesson has come to an end. Time to go back to school. After leaving, Anpheus couldn't help but feel regretful, because finding a child as intelligent as Siren was no easy feat. He just felt that if the boy had been born into a noble family and had been taught from a young age, his achievements would probably far surpass those of these other children. As for Siren, he climbed back over the wall to the outside, but his mind was in utter turmoil, because he knew that he had just entered the spiritual world. Siron had only told Anpheus that he heard a sound, but he didn't tell him everything that came after. That after that shocking sound, he felt as if he had been torn into hundreds of pieces and scattered across the world. He felt he was no longer a small entity, but that he was the entire world itself. That feeling made tears stream down Siren's face unconsciously. He couldn't help but tremble before the sheer vastness of this world. It was just for a brief moment, but Siron had truly escaped his own body and become one with the world. He ran headlong as if trying to vent the feelings inside him, and because of that emotional turmoil, Siron accidentally slammed right into a passerby, only he fell backward as the other person was quite large. Siron frantically apologized, but it seemed the other person had no intention of letting him go. There were a few others with him, and the one he'd bumped into immediately grabbed him by the collar. Are you crazy or something? When you bump into someone, you have to pay up, right? I'm sorry. Siren was so scared he started to stutter. Just saying sorry isn't enough. You're from the Wolf Guild, aren't you? Did you come here to take my life? Siren didn't understand what this Wolf Guild the man was talking about was, but if things continued like this, at best he'd get a beating, and at worst he'd lose his life. In his panic, he heard a female voice call out, What are you all doing? Is something interesting going on, Miss Amy? Why are you here? Are you bored again? That thug quickly turned to greet the newcomer, but his hand never let go of Siren's collar. The one they called Miss Amy was a young, noble girl with striking red hair. Siron wanted to ask for help, but when he saw she was a noble, he immediately gave up on the idea. As for the thugs, after greeting Amy, they got back to the matter at hand. First, Siren took a knee straight to the gut. He immediately collapsed to the ground, his whole body trembling in pain. Bullying a small child like Siren didn't make these guys feel ashamed at all. On the contrary, it excited them. The whole group started to continuously taunt Siren with vulgar words. They even asked about his parents using some very unpleasant language. Hearing them talk about his parents like that, Siren's expression immediately changed from fearful to full of indignation. The man noticed he was angry, but Siren had no chance to retaliate because right after that, he was kicked straight in the head. The whole group of large men ganged up on the child. Siren couldn't fight back. He could only curl up and protect his head. After a moment, Amy couldn't stand it anymore. She stepped closer. Hey, stop it. If you keep this up, he's really going to die. With that, she crouched down next to Siren and asked, Are you okay? I didn't do anything. I was just accidentally passing by. Siren seemed to sense a glimmer of hope from this girl. He explained while crying. Yeah, that's enough. Stop. Ami said, Isn't there a more fun game to play? He thought he was going to be saved, but unexpectedly, this girl with the angelic appearance was actually more monstrous than those thugs. In her eyes, Siren was truly just a toy. After we're done beating him, we were planning to sell him to the village in the south. Since he's just a commoner, there's nothing to worry about, one of the thugs suggested. Siren immediately fell into despair. He started to regret not staying put with the old man earlier. If they really planned to sell him, then maybe for the rest of his life, he would never be able to see his parents again. Ami stared at Siren with a judgmental gaze for a long moment, then suddenly broke into a bizarre smile. A slave shouldn't have any defects, right? If so, why don't I confirm it myself? The thugs surrounding her immediately burst out laughing. Ha ha ha! Miss Amy, are you going to inspect him? You hear that, kid? She's telling you to take off your clothes. Hearing the words, "take off your clothes," Amy's expression changed, and she automatically took a step back. She had only intended to play around with Siren for a bit and then let him go. She never expected these crazy guys would actually try to do it. Moreover, Siren looked like he was about to go berserk. The threatening laughter of the thugs faded in Siren's mind. Instead, he began to more clearly hear the buzzing wings of a fly passing by. Then, space itself seemed to freeze. Siren felt his mind drifting back a few hours. He saw Headmaster Anpheus with a group of students sitting under that ancient tree, and he was chanting a spell, creating wind to show him what this thing called magic looked like. Siren had no more doubts. He was inside his own memory. Anpheus's spell became clear in his mind. Everything poured into Siren's head, becoming his own knowledge. While Siren's spirit was returning to the world of his memories, in the real world, he was frozen stiff like a log. Seeing Siren show no reaction at all, the thugs got even angrier. He grabbed his collar again. "Hey, you little punk, are you deaf?"
Do I look like I'm joking around?
Only Amy noticed that something was wrong here. She quickly shouted at "Stop!" But it was already too late. Drawing on the memory he had just found, Chiron unconsciously unleashed that wind spell. Just like what Anpheus had done back then. He created a whirlwind strong enough to sweep all the thugs up into the sky. By the time Chiron came to his senses, they were already in free fall. And from such a great height, it was only natural that they would break their arms and legs upon landing. Chiron had taken down nearly 10 thugs, each several times his size, in a single move. And honestly, he wasn't even sure how he'd done it. "Hey!" Amy screamed, rushing over and snapping Siren back to his senses. "What the hell are you? Where did you learn magic? Why does a commoner like you have magic, huh?" Just then, a few people who heard the loud noise from this direction came running over. Not wanting to deal with a complicated crowd, Amy quickly made her escape. Siren was stunned when he saw her move as fast as a squirrel, leaping to the rooftop of a building and disappearing. But that wasn't important right now. What was important was the mess right in front of him, and he'd bet the newcomers wouldn't let him explain. Siren had to get away. He couldn't get caught again. And so, he started to bolt. Sprinting for his life to get out of that alley. His first time leaving the village had left Siren with too many terrifying experiences. He felt this world was too scary. He wanted to get back to the safety of his parents' arms as quickly as possible. That was all he wanted. Meanwhile, Ami had returned to her home. Her family was the Kamis clan, a first-class noble family. Ami returned fuming, furious that she had been defeated by some commoner kid. The head of the Kamis clan, Sakura, saw his daughter return and immediately guessed she had caused trouble again. "Back so soon? Did you skip class today, Amy?" "I've already learned everything. It's not fun anymore, Father." Amy replied sullenly, then stormed off to her room. Sakura was at his wit's end with his daughter. "When will you ever grow up? Even if you are a genius, you can't be so reckless. If you are, one day you'll be surpassed." Sakura was just speaking casually, but it seemed his last sentence hit a sore spot for Amy. Today she really had been surpassed, and what's more, by a commoner kid. Seeing his daughter suddenly go silent like that, Sakura wasn't used to it. Normally, if he criticized her like this, Ami would have thrown a fit. But today was different. She just stayed quiet for a long moment, then suddenly asked a question completely out of character for her. "Father, about magic, do you know anyone at a magic academy you could introduce me to?" After that chaotic trip, Chiron finally found his father. As soon as he found Vincent, he threw himself into his arms, crying and saying he had gotten lost. The two of them, father and son, returned to their small, quiet village, but his personality changed completely after that. Winter arrived. The day after they returned home, Vincent found his wife, Olena, sitting and knitting a scarf. She said that Siren had gone to the logging area to chop more firewood, even though it was snowing heavily. Feeling uneasy, Vincent went to find him. Even though they weren't related by blood, Vincent had raised Siren since he was a child and considered him his own son. With that fatherly love, he could clearly sense the change in his son after his first trip to the city that spring. And even though Siren had only said he got lost, Vincent always felt that it wasn't that simple. Right now, he was in the forest chopping wood. Though many days had passed, Siren still couldn't forget the day he unconsciously unleashed magic on those thugs, and since then, he hadn't been able to use it even once more. He had successfully summoned that magic through instinct, but he had no basic knowledge of spellcasting. That's why he couldn't succeed again. However, Chiron had now mastered entering the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, he could perceive everything just as if it were real, the feeling, the shape, the scent. He could sense everything about the tree in front of him all at once, and he could even see the tree's weakest point. This allowed Chiron to fell a tree 5 to 6 times his height with a single swing of his axe. This entire scene was witnessed by Vincent, who was a seasoned hunter, and he would bet that what he had just seen was the thunder strike, the phenomenon of felling a tree with a single axe blow by hitting its weak point. But how could Chiron, such a small, skinny child, do something that even a skilled hunter like Vincent found difficult? Watching his young son carefully sawing a tree trunk in the freezing winter air, Vincent couldn't help but shed a tear, while Chiron, on the other hand, seemed incredibly excited, because this was the first time he'd successfully created a lightning strike after chopping down countless trees, just like his success in summoning magic that day. Chiron knew he wasn't as fortunate as the children of nobility, but that didn't stop him from thirsting for foundational knowledge about magic. For tomorrow, the day after, and all the days that followed, Chiron would continue repeating these actions to feel the magic, believing that his chance would surely come one day. Before long, his persistence truly brought Chiron some achievements. And so, time passed. 3 years later, Chiron was much taller, his hair had grown longer, and he had successfully created a lightning strike that hit its mark every time. By now, it was as if he had become one with nature. Chiron could even feel the trembling of every bush, the movement of insects, the absorption of nutrients through the roots of every tree. But Chiron knew that wasn't all. If he continued to train, a new world would open up to him. Today, he had already spent 5 hours meditating in the forest to train his spirit. Having achieved the desired results, Chiron shouldered a pile of firewood and headed home. On his way back, he saw 2 white horses, a precious breed. They didn't normally appear in this remote area. A luxurious carriage was parked in front of Chiron's house. He immediately guessed they had a visitor, but when he stepped inside, both his father and mother looked extremely tense, which made Chiron a little worried. "You're back? Come in and meet this person," Vincent called out to the owner of that luxurious carriage. He was the head butler of the Ozan family. He introduced himself as Timuran. Chiron had no idea what the man wanted with him, especially since the Ozan family was a great noble house, ranked second in the entire kingdom, but he still replied politely. Timuran approached and carefully observed Chiron's face and build, as if appraising a valuable piece of merchandise. "Can you read?" he asked. "I learned a little when I was young." Timuran seemed to ponder this, then began to nod, continuing to scrutinize Chiron. "You seem to have been raised well. Just a hunter's son, yet you can read. You're a well-behaved child, too." "Wait a minute. Can you please explain why you're here?" Chiron was growing impatient, and finally, Timuran revealed the true purpose of his visit. He was here to recruit Chiron to work for the Ozan family, although Chiron didn't understand how the man even knew of him. The job was to move a total of 10,000 Jatsuon books out of the main library of the estate, which contained many important volumes. This task would be carried out over 2 years. The transportation would be handled by others, but the sorting would be completed by Timuran and Chiron alone. As soon as he heard the word library, Chiron's heart began to pound. What's more, it was the library of the Ozan family. It was sure to be filled with knowledge crucial for a mage. However, Timuran continued, "The only people who will know about this are your family. If a single book is misplaced, or if word of this gets out, then your life and the lives of your family will be forfeit." It was then that Chiron understood why his parents had looked so worried. Of course, because the job was so dangerous, the Ozan family had agreed to pay a great deal of money, an amount Vincent could never earn in a lifetime of hunting. Of course, he didn't covet wealth so much that he was willing to sell his precious son. He agreed to Timuran's request solely so that his son could read to his heart's content in the Ozan library. "The sum you're being paid is indeed very large. It makes taking care of your son all these years worthwhile, doesn't it?" Timuran seemed very pleased with Chiron, and turned to say this to Vincent. But his words were tantamount to saying that Vincent had raised Chiron all these years just for the money. Because of this, he immediately stood up and slammed the table. "It's not for the money. I just want our Chiron to be able to achieve his dream." Timuran suddenly burst out laughing. "Ha ha, you're overthinking it. You think the boy is going to have a career? Stop dreaming. If you weren't doing this for the money, what other reason could you have for begging me to choose your son, His tone was filled with mockery. "Because you said he could read." Vincent nearly screamed. He remembered that when Sharon was little, Olena had taught him a few words just for fun. But unexpectedly, by the age of 6, the boy had started reading on his own to learn. Vincent still remembered it clearly, how obedient and adorable Sharon had looked. But more importantly, he was an intelligent child. Every time he looked into the boy's beautiful, refined eyes and saw him engrossed in a book, Vincent had the same thought. Could my adopted son be of noble blood? And if he had been raised by a noble family instead of a family of hunters like them, would his life have been better? Throughout those days, Vincent had struggled immensely. On one hand, he wanted to keep Sharon for himself and raise him to be a hunter, a woodcutter, just like him. But when he saw Sharon spending hours a day in the forest, tirelessly chopping wood, he felt a deep unease. That's why it was Vincent who had actively sought out Timurin. After hearing that the Ozan family was looking for a literate commoner's child, all Vincent wanted was for Siron to go there. He wanted him to read the books he desired, so he went to beg Timurin. But he never expected that incredibly arrogant man to assume Vincent was trying to sell his son in exchange for money. This made him furious. I don't need any money. If I had known you would look at me like that, I never would have come begging. Now get out of my house this instant! Timurin was an arrogant man himself. After being yelled at so directly, he immediately turned to leave. But just as he reached the door, Siron quickly called him back, saying he would take the job, regardless of how dangerous it was, or if it made Timurin look down on his family. Are you serious? I'm not threatening you. Let me warn you, even the smallest rumor could cost you your life. Timurin warned him, but even so, Siron remained firm. He asserted that he could keep his mouth shut under any circumstances, and if anything were to happen, he wouldn't blame Timurin or the Ozan family. Seeing the young man's determination, Timurin didn't bother trying to dissuade him any further. He said he would send a carriage for him to pick up Siron within the next week. During that time, if you refuse and change your mind, that's fine. But once Siron steps foot inside the Ozan mansion, he will not be allowed to leave until the job is finished. After giving his instructions, Timurin didn't linger. With only the 3 family members left, Vincent frantically asked his son, Siron, why would you agree to something like this? Those bastards just need someone to die for them. This is my fault. I'll take responsibility, so please just turn it down. Vincent's face was covered in tears, and at that moment, Siron started to cry as well. But he wasn't crying because he blamed Vincent for pushing him into danger. He was crying out of gratitude for being given such a great gift. Because the chance to step into the Ozan library and read the precious magic books inside was an opportunity that in this lifetime, Siron would never even dare to dream of. Father, thank you so much, Siron cried, but a radiant smile was on his face. Vincent quickly pulled him into a hug, comforting him endlessly. Don't worry, Siron, and you remember to come back in one piece. I'll make sure they don't lay a single finger on anyone in this family. In that moment, Vincent truly didn't know if he had done the right thing. Olena couldn't hold back her tears either, worried for her son. But if he was determined to go, the 2 of them couldn't stop him. 1 week later, as promised, Timurin sent his men to pick up Siron. After having Vincent sign an agreement, they quickly escorted Siron away. The carriage door closed and the wheels began to turn. Siron quickly entered his spirit world. He could see Vincent and Olena holding each other, sobbing miserably. Subconsciously, Siron reached out to touch them, but a final shred of reason made him pull his hand back. That's right. This opportunity was a double-edged sword. Working for the Ozan family was dangerous, but it would also grant Siron so much, and he would not tremble and back down. As for the Ozan family, their main estate was located in the city of Chris, within the kingdom of Temia. It was quite far from the capital, Bazooka. The Ozans were a warrior family that typically trained orthodox swordsmen. The previous head of the family was a level 3 swordsman, and the current head, Gizmor Ozan, was a level 4 orthodox knight. In short, they held sway over the powerful factions within the city. Sometime later, the carriage arrived before the Ozan estate. This was the first time Siron had ever set foot in a noble's home, and a second-rank noble at that, a major power, within the kingdom. The magnificent and splendid scene before him was truly overwhelming. The 2 people in charge of receiving Siron led him to the administration office, which doubled as the butler's lounge. It was also where he would be living for the next 2 years. Timurin was already waiting there. He gave Siron no time to rest and immediately led him to the family's grand library. To explain the tasks Siron needed to perform, stepping into the Ozan family's library, Siron was even more overwhelmed. He had never seen so many books, and for a book lover like Siren, this was paradise. Because the Ozen family had built a new library, the books here were to be moved to it, and Siren's task was to organize them. He would receive a list every week, and based on the titles on it, he was to find and gather them. His work hours were from 9 in the morning to 6 in the evening, daily. Outside of that time, Siren was allowed to rest, but he was forbidden from going outside. He was also not allowed to enter the manor without permission. Timurin, as the head butler, would be busier. But aside from him, other butlers would teach him the rules and etiquette of this household. "Do you have any questions?" Timurin asked. Siren was still processing the information he had just been told. He felt this was truly an opportunity worth risking his life for. "When do I start?" Siren answered with a question of his own. "You start tomorrow." And just like that, the next morning, Siren changed into a pristine butler's uniform, took the list, and headed to the Grand Library. After a night of racking his brain, he finally understood why the great Ocean family would hire only one person to handle the job of organizing books. It was probably because they needed a consistent standard for book arrangement. For example, if you needed to shelve a book called The History of Swordsmanship, everyone would have a different opinion about whether it should be placed in the professional swordsmanship section or the comprehensive history section. And another thing Saran realized while experiencing these shelving systems was that all knowledge is interconnected, and the core element that links them all is history. Knowledge is gradually built upon a straight line called history. History is the very backbone of knowledge. After studying history thoroughly and using it to reinforce other fields, Siren's reading speed also increased significantly. Among the 10,000 books here, about 850 were history books, and he planned to read all of them within his 2 years here. This was to achieve his greatest dream of becoming a mage. Time passed by slowly, and Siren adapted to his work very quickly. That evening, while sneaking in some reading in the library, Chiron heard footsteps. It was Temuran, along with a vice butler. Chiron quickly put away the book in his hands, because after all, him reading books here was against the rules. "Have you finished organizing everything? Working overtime again, are you?" "Yes, sir." Chiron hurriedly stood up straight and answered seriously. Timurin didn't suspect a thing, only reminding Siren not to overwork his body since he still had 2 full years in this library. And most importantly, he had to take full responsibility for everything he did. If he let fatigue cause him to make a mistake, his head might roll before he even knew it. After leaving a new list, Timurin left. But after a few steps, he suddenly turned around and walked straight back to Chiron, making him extremely tense. "What is this? Don't tell me he found out that I was secretly reading the library's books while working overtime." But fortunately, Timurin only came over to adjust the bow on Chiron's collar. "It's not just butlers who come to this library. The head of the family and the young masters visit as well. Pay attention to your uniform and make sure you're not tarnishing the Ocean family's reputation." Timurin also reminded Chiron to get his long hair trimmed. After that, he truly left. Chiron breathed a sigh of relief. He started thinking about tying his hair up, like his father. But in reality, there was something more pressing to think about. The knowledge in the books was too difficult. After Timurin and the vice butler left, Chiron once again began to struggle with the massive amount of information. He originally wanted to just memorize it quickly, but if he wanted to access the knowledge of a book at any time, Chiron had to clearly understand every single event within it. And so, he tried to cram more words into his head, but he had already been working his tail off all day. Very quickly, Chiron couldn't fight off the drowsiness any longer and slumped over the table. Once he was sound asleep, a hand reached out and picked up the book he was reading. It was Timurin, who had returned at some point. "Such a fool." He clicked his tongue and mumbled to himself. "He's been holding on to this one book for a whole month. Do you think you can succeed through study alone? If you were reading books with practical applications, I would have banned you from coming here outside of work hours. However, it's fortunate because you're just a fool with willpower." 3 months had passed. Chiron had gotten used to working at the Ozen family's grand library. He had also learned many other things from the maids after 3 months of work. Chiron also realized something. The nobility didn't actually care if 1 or 2 books went missing. That also meant there probably weren't any overly important books in the library. But that didn't mean Siren was any safer, so he still maintained the same mindset he had when Timurin found him. He could not allow himself to make any mistakes. While he was lost in thought, the door to the grand library was suddenly thrown open, followed by a voice that pierced his eardrums.
What the hell, you damn old bastard?
He flinched and looked up. The one who had just burst in was a tall, blue-haired young man. From what Siren understood, this was the youngest young master of this family.
Ryan!
Another voice echoed, this time sounding even more terrifying.
How dare you run away, Rian? Wait till I catch you! You'll be running another 100 laps!
Rian quickly dashed toward Siren, then crawled under the nearby table. Before hiding, he didn't forget to tell him not to tell the person coming that he was hiding here. Rian's large frame put a lot of pressure on Siren, but the person who burst into the grand library after him had an even bigger build.
I know you're hiding in here, Ryan. Hey, you! A little blue-haired kid as tall as a bean just burst in here.
Right? Chiron was speechless. If that blue-haired kid was the size of a bean, what did his own skinny frame look like in this old man's eyes? But he looked so scary. Chiron decided he had to probe the man's identity first. Excuse me, but may I ask who you are, sir? I'm a swordsmanship instructor. I'm the instructor who has the right to beat that little bean to a pulp. Got it? The two words, got it, practically shattered Siren's eardrums. He felt that if he didn't answer, this old man would bury him on the spot. So, even though the youngest young master had warned him forcefully, Siren still had to honestly confess that he was hiding under the bookshelf next to them. Ryan's swordsmanship instructor immediately grabbed his collar with one hand and dragged him out.
Master, this is just a misunderstanding.
Rian tried to explain, but the man gave him no chance. Rian was thrown hard to the ground by his master. Then he grabbed the boy's leg and dragged him away. Come with me, you worthless brat. Daring to skip your training, you need to have that attitude of yours beaten back into shape. Ryan looked utterly devastated. Siren could clearly read his lips as he mouthed the words, "You will pay for this." But Ryan's sword master looked even more powerful than the head of the family, so Siren had no other choice. After that day, Siren overheard that the youngest young master had been caught and taken to the mountains to train. So, in the days that followed, no one burst into the library shouting anymore. He was no longer startled like that. For the next few days in the great library, Siren continued to complete his work while also finding time to read. The first book took him 20 days to finish. But after fully understanding that book, he read 82 books in just 4 months. Everything was progressing just as Siren had thought. Only the beginning was difficult. After that, no book contained entirely new content. If he could build a foundation with the first 200 books, then the remaining 650 would be much easier to absorb. As Siren read books on the history and origins of magic, he began to question whether studying the history and origins of magic at this time was the right choice. But because he had already studied the formation of all things, he became more certain that his decision was correct. Because if a scholar can create a theorem, a mage can do the same. But they also have to turn that theory into a practical application. Therefore, a mage is like a scholar, but not all scholars are mages, because not everyone can enter that godless state of consciousness, that mental world. Therefore, Siren became more convinced that with his mental world, as long as he absorbed the vast amount of knowledge contained in these books, he could become a true mage. Just when he thought his peaceful days would last forever that evening, Ryan returned, furious. "Hey, you bastard! I've walked through hell waiting for this day." It was the same blue hair, tall figure, and ear-splitting voice. Siren silently broke into a cold sweat. This young master was certainly persistent. To go through such an ordeal on the mountain and still remember the grudge from being exposed by him in this library. Ryan was so furious his teeth were chattering. "Do you have any idea how much trouble I've been through?" The bastard. Then he began to recount how his master had tortured him. Things like climbing cliffs countless times until his fingers had no strength left. But every time he thought he was about to die, Rian would remember his grudge from the library, remember the one who put him in this situation, and as if he'd been given a surge of strength. Siren sighed to himself. This young master doesn't just hold a grudge. It seems his anger has been building up and has reached its peak. Aren't you going to open your mouth and say something? I asked you for help, I trusted you, but you turned around and sold me out to my master. Just looking at a coward like you makes me sick. As he spoke, Rian grabbed Siren by the collar. That's not what happened. I only told the truth, sir. Don't try to justify yourself. You should have said that you wouldn't follow my request back then. Siren sighed internally. It seemed impossible to reason with someone this angry who had such overwhelming power over him. Then, young master, and what should I do? Rian seemed surprised to be questioned back by Siren with such a calm demeanor. Then, He burst out laughing and dragged Siren to the sword training grounds, even though it was the middle of the night. Siren assumed he was going to beat him with a sword until his anger subsided. He didn't want to lose the opportunity his parents had risked their lives to beg for him, so he resolved to lie still and take Rian's beating. However, after looking over the weapons hanging on the rack for a moment, Rian grabbed a wooden sword and tossed it to Siren. He demanded Siren fight him in a one-on-one duel. "I'm not a coward like you. The price for underestimating me? You, who are destined to become a grand swordmaster, will have to face the wrath of my blade. What did I do that was cowardly, young master?" Having been repeatedly labeled a coward by Ryan, Siren seemed agitated and retorted, "As a servant of the Ozin family, you should have protected a member of the Ozin family, but you sold me out to my master. Just because you were afraid of getting hit, isn't that cowardice?" When Ryan said these words, Siren could clearly feel the change in his eyes. They had become somewhat vicious. Siren instinctively tightened his grip on the sword in his hand, which was exactly what Ryan wanted. Due to the huge skill gap between them, he allowed Siren the first 3 moves. Siren was extremely tense. Although it was only a wooden sword and couldn't kill him instantly, the wood was very hard. If he broke a bone, Siren would be sent home and lose this job. A question kept flashing in his mind. What should I do now? After a few seconds of thought, Siren gripped his sword tightly and launched a powerful attack, but Ryan easily dodged this first move. When Siren struck for the second time, he used his own sword to block it. Unlike Siren's trembling grip, it was clear Rian had a much better grasp of the fundamentals. His strength was also far superior. Sweat was already dripping down Siren's neck. He had only one chance left to attack his opponent, and if he failed this time, Siren would lose completely. He focused his mind completely and entered his spirit realm. Within this spiritual domain, Siren could sense the weakest point on his opponent's sword. Just like the times he had successfully created the thunder strike while chopping firewood, Siren immediately launched his attack after identifying the target. Rian instantly raised his sword to defend. He even sneered at him because his attack posture was so ridiculous. However, when Siren's sword came down, Rian couldn't smile anymore because the sword in his hand was instantly struck, shattered into many pieces. Rian looked absolutely horrified. He stared blankly at the sword in his hand for a long time. Siren's sword had also broken, but he had succeeded. Ryan had given him 3 moves. He had used the first to feel out his opponent's strength, the second to calculate his timing, and the third to execute his plan. This was the thunder strike he had been practicing for the past 3 years. Rian's voice trembled as he spoke. Where did you learn swordsmanship?" "This isn't swordsmanship, this is just the thunder strike," Siren answered honestly. Seeing Rian's confused expression, Siren even kindly explained that his father was a hunter and that he had followed him to chop trees in the mountains since he was a child. Because his physique was too weak, he couldn't chop wood the normal way, and so he figured out this move to make chopping wood easier. As for Thunder Strike, that was just the name the lumberjacks gave it. The more Ryan heard, the more bewildered he became. Such a powerful strike was figured out by his opponent while chopping wood? Meanwhile, he had held a sword for 15 years, and yet he lost to the son of a lumberjack. Furthermore, the thing Siren just called Thunder Strike was actually the ultimate sword technique, a secret skill of the Ozin family that Rian's older brother Giai had learned when he was only 12 years old. Back then, Ryan had been defeated by Giai using this very technique. Today, he was defeated by Siren using that same skill. "I will not accept this!" he screamed, his hands clenching into fists, unable to hold it in any longer. Seeing his opponent's expression grow increasingly serious, Siren, who had just relaxed a bit, began to tense up again. "Young master, have I upset you?" "Shut up!" Rian shouted. Then he took out another sword. This time it was a real, proper sword, and he threw it towards Siren. "Since both of our weapons were destroyed, this match isn't over yet. If you've mastered the ultimate sword technique, then I should treat you accordingly." Siren's heart felt like it would leap out of his chest. "Don't tell me the young master has gone mad and wants to fight me with a real sword." Fortunately, Ryan wasn't that crazy. The duel with real swords was going to happen, but he would give Siren 1 month to prepare first. A month might sound long, but for someone with no foundation in swordsmanship like Siren, it was utterly useless. He held the sword in his hand, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. If it's a real sword, then he could actually die. Siren didn't want to risk his life, so he begged Rian to reconsider because he had never learned swordsmanship in his life, so how could he possibly duel? But Ryan had absolutely no intention of, taking back his words. That's why I'm giving you a month. If you were able to master an ultimate sword technique just by chopping wood, then you'll figure something out. And don't even think about running away because I will definitely surpass you. The sword in his hand wasn't too heavy, but Siren felt like it was crushing his very heart. After returning to the Grand Library and gathering some information, Siren finally understood why the youngest young master had reacted so intensely. The people of the Ozin family were said to have either black or blue hair. The family head, Ozin Bichov, had black hair and had fathered 3 sons and 1 daughter. His eldest son had black hair. He was already a level 6 swordsman. The eldest daughter, who had blue hair, possessed exceptional musical talent and was now a musician in the palace instead of following her family's path of the sword. The second son, Ozin Giai, also had black hair. He was the one who had learned the ultimate sword technique at age 12 and was considered a genius. Rian Ozin, however, was considered completely different from his siblings. The servants in the house all agreed that he was rather untalented, despite having his own private tutor. Siren's mood plummeted. He started to regret everything. Why didn't I just let Ryan beat me to his heart's content with that wooden sword? Why did I have to fight back, leading to this whole mess? Rian's pride had been severely wounded, and it seemed he was determined to win a match against Siren to shed that psychological burden. Siren even cried from the intense stress. If he died in the duel with Rian a month from now, his parents would surely not be able to live in peace. Thinking of his parents, Siren didn't allow himself to wallow in despair any longer. Get it together. You're going to become a mage, aren't you? Siren thought to himself, then began searching for books in the library. Back when he lived on the mountain, Siren had been very confident in his physical strength, so he felt that if he just learned a few defensive skills, he could definitely survive. And so Siren began to study everything within his reach. Meanwhile, Rian began to train like a madman. His sudden enthusiasm greatly surprised his swordsmanship master. The very kid who had always skipped practice was now personally asking him for more intense training methods. The swordmaster wasn't stupid. He quickly realized that something must have happened to Ryan, but he just replied that it was nothing. Seeing Ryan's determination, he didn't press the issue. Instead, he started giving him a demonic training regimen that was many times more brutal. While Ryan was sweating buckets in the training yard, Siren was carefully studying the force diagram. It was considered a simple diagram of the human body. If mages had the spirit realm, then swordsmen had the force diagram to help them visualize their bodies. The force diagram could push their limits to the extreme. A person who mastered the force diagram could perfectly use and control every single cell in their body. This was the most crucial element to becoming a swordsman. This discipline is the complete opposite of the spirit zone, the one that Siren managed to open, but it also intrigued him. Should I give it a try? Siren thought to himself, and he was a man of action. Siren closed the book, shut his eyes, and began to look inward. This was the first step to opening the force diagram, and it was quite simple, as it was similar to entering the spirit zone. If opening the spirit zone required a person to erase their sense of self, then opening the force diagram required them to delve deep into their own existence. In truth, Siren didn't want to pour all his effort into the force diagram, since it was the antithesis of the spirit zone. So, he shifted his focus to learning some basic swordsmanship skills, using his existing spirit zone as a foundation. Siren carried a pile of sword technique books out to the backyard. He started with the very basics, the 8 directions of the slash. Meanwhile, Rian was pushing himself so hard in his training that even his swordsmanship instructor was getting scared. He had never seen his student this agitated, despite having taught him since he was a boy. Rian's feelings were incredibly complex. In truth, Siren was just the last straw. The core of the problem was, Rian was always being compared to his older siblings, and the fact that he had practiced the sword for 15 years without opening his force diagram made him the failure of the Ozin family. His swordmaster, though he appeared strict, was actually a very sentimental man. Today, seeing this frightening change in his student, he actually shed a tear. Rian, that's enough. We're stopping here for today. His instructor stopped the sword in Rian's hand. Only then did he feel how exhausted every muscle in his body was. Rian obediently put his sword down, sat, and began to stare blankly into the distance. What's on your mind, son? Rian's master asked while dabbing his student's sweat. I'm thinking my arms are about to fall off, Rian answered. I never knew you could try so hard. But I think you've done very well. Have you ever considered what you're best at? He suddenly asked. I don't know, Rian replied. I only know the things I'm bad at. That's exactly right. That's why you're not a genius. Ryan bristled, thinking his master was mocking him. But when he turned, he saw his master's expression was dead serious, his eyes heavy with unspoken thoughts. He said that all geniuses know what they are best at, and they only put in the effort when they are 100% confident that they will succeed. But even geniuses have one fear: the hard work it takes to achieve the impossible. A burning will that challenges the impossible. That will and that determination is the nemesis of geniuses. Thank you, Master, Ryan said with a wry smile. Of all the words of encouragement I've ever heard, I think I like those the best. His sword instructor wasn't just speaking carelessly. Those words truly ignited a powerful fighting spirit in Ryan. If talent wasn't something he was born with, then he would grit his teeth and forge it through sheer hard work. Ryan wanted to use his determination to make the impossible possible. He wanted to win. And coincidentally, that was the same thought going through the mind of Siren, who was struggling with basic sword forms at that very moment. Siren was also taking his first sword forms very seriously. Swordsmanship is the process of learning the movements required to take another person's life. Therefore, its flip side is an intense psychological battle over life and death. With no training partner, Siren could only grip the sword that Ryan had thrown him and imagine an invisible enemy in front of him, an enemy that could attack from many directions. In fact, with a sword, there are 8 directions. Major ones, and Siren, through his own extraordinary efforts, had trained himself in those 8 slashes, as well as how to counter those 8 directions of attack. He continued to train like this. He then discovered that the path of the sword was as boundless as magic, and everything he had taught himself was merely a grain of sand in a vast desert. Father, Mother, I'm sorry, but it seems I won't be able to return home this time. Siren spoke to himself, his voice full of sorrow. But from the moment he entered the Ozen household, he had never once regretted his decision, even though his chosen path meant facing death itself. But he had also been able to see a wonderful new world. A month flew by. Siren arrived at the training grounds as promised to begin his life-or-death duel with Ryan. In just one short month, he could clearly sense that his opponent's aura had completely changed. And that was exactly what Ryan sensed from Siren as well, after all, just 1 month ago. He had been a mess of chaotic posture and poor balance. Yet now, Siren was perfectly stable, even though this was his first time holding a real sword. He was perfectly calm. This made Ryan instinctively compare Siren to his talented older brother, which only fueled his desire to win even more. Ryan charged forward first. Siren was incredibly tense, because even though the servants called this young master talentless, his swordsmanship was on a completely different level from his own. But fortunately, thanks to his non-stop efforts over the past month, Siren was able to perceive the direction of the sword's path. Siren's calmness and the way he observed the blade's trajectory only made the blood rush to Ryan's head. Isn't he afraid of this sword? He wondered. The truth was, Siren wasn't some daredevil who didn't fear death, but he had his emotions under complete control. Over here, Ryan attacked again, this time with a strike from his right. Siren managed to block it again. But while the first and second blows were manageable, Ryan's speed increased with every following strike, soon surpassing Siren's ability to even perceive the blade's direction. Finally, the tip of Ryan's sword found its mark. It carved a shallow gash across Siren's chest. As fresh blood trickled out, he knew he was about to lose. Siren quickly changed tactics, retreating backward with all his might. Along with the pain spreading from his chest came an inexplicable question as Ryan looked into his eyes. As if understanding that question, he grew even more smug. What he had just used was the ocean sword style for training with great swords. Every single slash was the result of Ryan's bone-breaking effort. That's why its power was on a completely different level from normal sword skills. After wounding Siren, he became even more bloodthirsty. In Ryan's eyes now there was only one goal: to crush Siren with his strength. They charged into a second round, but this time Siren felt something was off again. If Ryan had slashed upwards after striking his chest, Siren would have been cut on his flank. But Ryan's follow-up attacks didn't seem to be finishing blows. This meant his understanding of swordsmanship was lower than Siren had thought. Ryan could swing a sword skillfully, but he didn't understand how to use his techniques effectively. This was the opening Siren needed to turn the tables. He immediately changed his battle plan by putting all his strength into an attack. Siren had learned the basic sword swings, so his strikes were relatively clean, and Ryan was truly stunned once more. Why is he suddenly attacking? Shouldn't he be exhausted by now? He was utterly bewildered, asking himself these questions. And Ryan became even more confused when it was clear that the techniques Siren was using were quite simple, yet he couldn't block them. Ryan, who had been on a frenzied offensive, was suddenly forced onto the defensive. Noticing his opponent's stamina gradually draining with each clumsy block, Siren's hope of preserving his humble life grew stronger. He just needed to persevere. If he could maintain his stamina and keep up this offensive rhythm, he could win. Meanwhile, Ryan's mental state was in turmoil. Siren's overwhelming pressure caused a ghost from the past to reappear in his mind. Ryan remembered his older brother, Ji, the one his father hailed as a genius, the same one who had defeated him with a fatal sword technique. He recalled his brother's arrogant, satisfied smile upon defeating him. Ryan's anger erupted once more, and he directed all of it at Siren. This sudden loss of composure made Siren think he had given up. But right at that moment, a new problem arose. Ryan was indeed not calm, but that burst of rage had significantly increased the speed of his swings. It was so fast that Siren couldn't read all of the blade's trajectories, and on the final strike, Siren felt as if the Grim Reaper himself had come to tap him on the shoulder. But with such a strong protagonist halo, of course this old boy wasn't going to kick the bucket. Neither of them landed a hit, because Ryan's sword had been sent flying by Siren's own blade. He stood there, dazed and confused. Siren, on the other hand, was so tired he could barely breathe. Ryan could see clearly what happened in that final exchange. Siren had read the path of his sword, and in an instant had changed his grip. The tip of Siren's sword pointed upward, meeting Ryan's downward slashing blade head-on. With all his remaining strength, he had defeated Ryan by knocking his sword away. Siren gasped for air. He had won, but he still couldn't believe he had actually won. And even though he had truly won, Siren felt extremely awkward. It was a duel, yes, but his opponent was still a nobleman, and he had once again trampled on his sky-high pride. He had no idea what Ryan might do next. Siren was tense. He couldn't imagine how crazy Ryan's next bout of anger might make him. But this time, Ryan wasn't angry. He just lowered his head and said 3 words, "I have lost." While Siren was still processing this, Ryan scratched his head and repeated those 3 words. "I have lost." A few more times, looking flustered. "I have lost. And you have won. Since I've lost, even if you decide to take my life, I have nothing more to say." Siren was a bit surprised. He didn't think Ryan would admit defeat so readily, let alone allow him to decide his fate. He's a noble. How could I possibly survive if I touched even a single hair on his head? "What ridiculous nonsense are you spouting, young master?" Siren nearly shouted at Ryan. "We fought with our very lives on the line, and I have admitted that I lost." "Therefore you have the right to take my life, do you not?" Ryan replied cluelessly. "You were the only one who wanted to bet your life on this thing." "I, on the other hand, would like to live," Siren yelled. "That means from the very beginning I thought this duel was ridiculous. Why are you blaming and trying to corner me when you're the one who ran away from our master? Just because you didn't want to train?" The rage rushing to his head made Siren fearless, and he bluntly criticized the young master before him. Ryan, however, wouldn't back down. He immediately activated his foul mouth to argue back. "Hold on, you bastard! Who should be blaming who, huh? This is all because you're a coward. Even if it was the first time we met and under those circumstances, you still should have respected me, shouldn't you?" "Respect my ass!" Siren cut him off. "Have you ever considered how awkward of a position you put me in? I was caught between the son of the head of the house and his own swordsmanship master. If you were truly worthy of respect, you wouldn't have pushed a humble servant like me into a situation like this." The more Siren spoke, the more worked up he got, unleashing all his pent-up frustration to scold Ryan to his face. To be honest, this young master was a real piece of work. He only wanted to challenge Siren because of his own inflated pride. It was for his own honor not to push Siren to his death. But Siren truly thought this was it for him, that he was a goner. After scolding Ryan for a good while, he was so exhausted he collapsed onto the ground. Across from him, Ryan had just been chewed out by a family servant so thoroughly he didn't know what hit him. But strangely, he wasn't angry at all. In that moment when Siren had his outburst, Ryan felt that the cold, calm warrior he had just faced had vanished. In his place was a teenager who was only around his own age. And the most important thing was, even though Ryan felt Siren was definitely a genius, he hadn't mocked Ryan the way Jai had. Instead, Siren had just fought him with all his might. It was partly to protect himself, but also to respect his opponent. Because of all this, Rian had started to see the teenager before him in a different light. "What is your name?" he suddenly asked.
Siren."
Siren didn't know what the other boy was getting at, but he answered hesitantly.
"And I am Ozen Ryan,"
Rian declared loudly. Siren was once again confused. Who didn't know that this blue-haired youth was Ozen Ryan? And his confusion reached its peak when Rian suddenly extended a hand to help pull Siren up. Along with it came a proposition. "Let's be friends." And that was how the duel between the two ended. Siren returned to his work. In a flash, a year had passed since he first set foot in the Ozen mansion, and in total, Siren had sorted 7,028 out of 10,453 books. This progress was far beyond expectations. Even someone as demanding as Temeran couldn't help but leave a word of praise, because the number of books Siren needed to sort had decreased significantly. His work efficiency had also improved even more. His goal of reading all 850 history books was now down to just 200 left. He read up to 3 books every day, and soon, Siren would complete the foundational knowledge he had always dreamed of. Not only that, thanks to Ryan, he also got to experience swordsmanship and understand the nature of fear. As a result, it seemed the endurance of his spirit realm had also increased. Although the start was quite slow, he knew that as long as he didn't give up, he would eventually reach his goal. And most importantly, Siren had found the first good friend of his life, who was also the person who had yelled in his face the first time they met, Rian. Ryan was almost always rooted in the great library to talk with Siren. He also realized that Ryan was quite an emotional person and had some very endearing sides, a complete contrast to his imposing appearance. Although sometimes Ryan still behaved in ways that gave Siren a huge headache, like messing up a pile of books he had just sorted. But all in all, this friend was still quite worth it. It was just that after they became close, Ryan started getting lazy with his training. For example, today, after finishing his basic training, he told his master he wanted to go to the library to study, and then just planted himself there. Siren knew that this person who seemed lazy was actually a smoldering fire, and he could erupt at any moment. Rian would grow stronger as long as he had the chance, so there was no need to push him to overtrain. And so, Siren agreed to let Ryan stay in the library and read with him. But after only 10 minutes, Rian was already worn out by the words in the book. "Siren, didn't you say you wanted to become a mage? Do you really have to read this many books?" 800 of them. You're insane," Rian mumbled. "Of course. Actually, I'm still behind schedule. Before I came here, I never had a chance to study. But now that I've read over 600 history books, I pretty much know it all." Ryan had no interest in reading, so he just focused on observing Siren, and every time he watched him work, he was amazed all over again. Siren's reading speed was unbelievably fast, so much so that Rian felt like Siren could be pulled into the book at any moment. Out of sheer boredom, Ryan would read a few words and then start a conversation with Siren. Whenever the two were near each other, it was as rowdy as a tavern, and because of that, Siren couldn't concentrate on his reading. The two started debating about the book in Rian's hand. It was about the most common comparison on the continent. If a swordsman and a mage were to face off, who would be the winner? Obviously, the swordsman would win. A voice rang out from behind the bookshelf. The moment Siren heard it, he shot to his feet, because the owner of the voice was Ozen Jai, the second young master of the Ozen family, and the older brother that Ryan despised with a passion. Siran was extremely tense, terrified that Jai had overheard their earlier conversation. A servant who dared to speak disrespectfully to the child of a noble. It would not be let off easily. And Jai's gaze right now looked like it wanted to pierce right through him. Seeing Siren's discomfort, Ryan had to speak up to defend him. "Why do you talk as if you already know the outcome? Are you sure you're not siding with the swordsman just because you're a swordsman yourself?" "Oh, I didn't think you'd care so much about this. You just have to look at the status of swordsmen and mages on the continent to see the answer." Ryan burst out laughing. "We're talking about a fight. What the hell does their status have to do with anything? Do people choose their position on the battlefield based on their military rank? You're not really going to say something so meaningless, are you?" Rian's defiance was clear, but Jai couldn't be bothered to care. Instead, he turned to Shirin, who was standing beside him. "Oh, you over there, what do you think?" It was just a simple question, but Shirin could feel an invisible pressure from him. He couldn't guess what Jai's purpose was, or what would happen if he didn't give the answer he wanted. Would he even be safe? Even so, Shirin couldn't just ignore his question. He could only cautiously state his opinion. He believed that if a swordsman and a mage were of equal skill, it would be difficult for the swordsman to win. and once the mage had entered their spiritual domain. But if the swordsman used their superior physical strength to fight before the mage could establish their domain, they could definitely win. No, you're wrong. Jai cut Chiron off. At some point, he had moved to stand right in front of him. Jai was taller than Chiron, so his presence was incredibly overwhelming. You're wrong. The mage will lose. As he said this, a smug smile spread across Jai's face. This familiar, superior attitude was an eyesore to Rian. This trait of Jai's had been there since he was a child. Whenever he was annoyed by someone, he took pleasure in trampling on the things they held dear. Before, it was Rian. Now Jai wanted to pressure Chiron. You seem to like history, don't you? I'm sure you've heard of the 5 divine armors. The sacred artifacts capable of shattering a mage's spiritual world? I'm talking about anti-magic. Chiron was stunned by Jai's words. A mage's innate ability was their spiritual domain, their mental world. Fighting a mage within their domain was like fighting a school of sharks in the deep sea. However, there was something that could stir the waters and distract the sharks. That was the reason for something called anti-magic. The thing Jai just mentioned came into existence. If the spiritual world couldn't have an effect, then neither could magic. Once someone possessed a sacred artifact with this attribute, a mage would be helpless against them. But in the end, this was still just a theory. In the past, anti-magic was a precious power created from the flow of mana in a dragon's heart. This alone made its value extremely high. Besides that, due to frequency fluctuations, no amount of wealth could improve its effectiveness. Even a master mage like Iagra could only use up to 65% of the 5 gods' power. Therefore, the price of obtaining a sacred artifact was astronomical. Of course, in this day and age, it also had historical value, making the value of anti-magic equivalent to the annual budget of an entire kingdom. But the most troublesome issue here was, the creators of anti-magic were also mages. They created something that worked against themselves because the demand for it was huge, making it easy to profit from. Those mages are lining up, waiting to be employed. Being a mage is just a profession. They're just pathetic losers trying to sell their own weaknesses to make money. Jai's voice dripped with contempt. Ryan was furious because he knew Chiron dreamed of becoming a mage, and here Jai was, blatantly insulting that very profession. However, the one who should have been angry, Chiron, didn't seem to show much change in emotion. That's the nature of a mage, he said, suddenly breaking into a bright smile. This reaction from Chiron surprised both Ozen brothers, especially Jai. What did you say? He thought he had misheard. You're not wrong, sir. Anti-magic was indeed created by mages. It's used to limit the capabilities of magic in no-magic zones, and it's also used effectively to assist in the training of magic apprentices. Chiron's knowledge was in no way inferior to Jai's. He knew that anti-magic was indeed used against mages, but its existence was more like an intellectual achievement meant to serve noble purposes. And because of that, Chiron stood by his opinion that Jai's belief that swordsmen were superior to mages was just a one-sided, completely wrong view. Jai, as the second young master of the Ozen family, was used to running his mouth and trampling on others. Today, in his own home, he was being calmly countered by Chiron. Yet Chiron's attitude remained perfectly proper. This left Jai completely unable to find any fault. Humph! The theory you're spouting and reality are two very different things. No matter what, the truth is that a mage will never be able to defeat a swordsman. Having said his piece, Jai stormed off in a huff. Only then could Chiron let out a sigh of relief. A moment ago, when young Master Jai appeared with such a terrifying look on his face, he thought he was a goner. Rian was also delighted because he had finally found someone with a sharp tongue to talk back to Jai for him. After that incident, Jai no longer came to the library to cause trouble. Because of this, Chiron had time to focus more on his work. 6 months later, just as winter arrived, he had also completed his task of cataloging over 10,000 books. He finished the job 6 months faster than expected. Timurin seemed very relieved that the books that had been neglected for the past 25 years had finally been properly categorized. Chiron had completed his task and was now able to return home. But a butler from the Ozen household seemed reluctant to lose such a useful worker. He wanted to force Chiron to extend his contract with some ridiculous excuses, but Timurin didn't agree with this. Meanwhile, in the Grand Library, Chiron had finished the last book he needed to read, completing his year-and-a-half journey of devouring the books of the noble Ozen family. Ryan, who had been practicing his swordsmanship, came rushing over, all out of breath, after hearing that he had completed the book-sorting task. He was worried that Chiron would just go home like that. Seeing that Chiron had read over 800 books, Rian seemed even more excited than Chiron himself. To celebrate this, Chiron wanted to do something special and asked Ryan to give him a tour of his family's mansion, even though they lived on the same estate. However, they mostly met in the library, and it was usually Ryan who initiated it, because Chiron was just a servant and had absolutely no chance to see the place a nobleman truly called home. Coincidentally, the entire Ozin family was out today and would be back in the late afternoon, so Ryan cheerfully agreed to his request. Chiron had already thought the Grand Library was huge, but when he stepped inside the mansion, he was truly overwhelmed. Just a single room here was probably as big as his entire house. Ryan was truly the young master of an incredibly wealthy family, yet he wasn't the least bit arrogant. On the contrary, he was even a bit clueless. Rian took Chiron to see his bedroom, which was the smallest room at the end of the hallway. Chiron had prepared himself, bracing to be blinded by its luxury upon entering. But the truth was, Rian's bedroom was much simpler than the other rooms. More importantly, it was filled with training equipment and swords. As for the bed, that messy thing looked more like a temporary resting spot after practice. Chiron couldn't believe his eyes. A young master like Ryan living in such a simple place? You really can't judge a book by its cover. After the tour, Chiron and Ryan decided to play some poker. But Ryan kept whining about losing. "You're cheating with that spirit zone of yours, aren't you?" "What? Who do you think I am to resort to such a dirty trick?" With that, Chiron revealed to Ryan how he'd been guessing his cards, which was how he was winning. "You have a habit of putting your aces on the outside, and the way you bet when you have a pair is also pretty easy to spot." Ryan, having been called out, just wanted to throw a tantrum right then and there. Your observation skills work best when you clear your mind of any one particular thought. So when you observe an opponent, you should watch all of their actions. Then you can guess what they're thinking. Chiron was sincerely giving Ryan pointers, hoping he would soon break through to a new limit for himself. But he never expected that Ryan would doze off before he even finished 2 sentences. Chiron was about to return to his room when he heard the melodious sound of a piano. The melody, the tone, the warmth, everything was controlled perfectly by the player. Chiron unconsciously followed the music. He knew there was only one person in the world who could play at such a level. It was Rian's older sister, Vina Ozan. "What do you think of my sonata?" After the music stopped, Vina suddenly asked, making Chiron, who was hiding behind the tall door, jump in fright. Seeing that she had discovered him, he stopped hiding and walked right up to her. I think it was wonderful." Chiron's mood immediately became tense again. Perhaps it was because he was in front of a nobleman's daughter, or perhaps because Vina was so beautiful. "Hello. This is the first time we've met. Are you a new hire?" Vina continued to ask. "Ah, yes, miss. I'm in charge of sorting the books in the library. It's been a year now." Vina let out an "oh," because she had heard of Chiron's name before, as the brilliant child who could single-handedly sort over 10,000 books. "If that's the case, have you ever played the piano before?" Chiron really wanted to refuse. Other than Ryan, he didn't want to get involved with any other nobles. Moreover, Vina was an expert at channeling power into her performance, and Ryan had once said that his sister had the worst personality in the entire mansion. Because of that, Chiron looked very hesitant when he replied, "No, miss." "Then let me teach you. Come here." As she spoke, she placed one hand on the piano keys and patted the spot next to her with the other. He was stunned by her invitation, and sweat began to form on his forehead. He was incredibly tense, his mind screaming, "What? Sit there?" Vina, perceptive, noticed his tense expression. She calmly reassured him, "It's all right. I've given you permission so no one will blame you." He pressed his lips together, hesitating. His mind was in turmoil. "She's so insistent, and I'm in no position to refuse." Helpless, he had no choice but to sit down, feeling tense and nervous. Yet his heart was also pounding with excitement. He told himself, "Besides, when will I ever get another chance to sit in front of a piano?" He sat and listened seriously as she taught him the basics of music. She enthusiastically and patiently guided him through each note. Now, these notes are do, re, mi, and the symbols on the sheet music are model. She asked him to try pressing all 3 of these keys down at the same time. He quickly did as she said. His 3 fingers gently pressed down together. A sound rang out, making him a little flustered. The soaring, clear sound stirred his heart. He exclaimed, What a beautiful sound. She turned to look at him, surprised, and said, "That's a good start." His mind was now in an indescribable turmoil. He was embarrassed, his eyes unable to hide his awkwardness. "I'm sorry if this is too much to ask, but could I try playing?" She was very surprised by his request, but she didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. Of course. Chiron bowed his head, realizing his behavior was somewhat presumptuous. The request he'd just made felt like it was too much, and he felt it was not a good look at all. "Perhaps this isn't a good idea." Vina gave a gentle smile and said to him, "This is how everyone starts." However, deep in her mind, a question couldn't help but rise. Does he know more about music theory than what I just taught him? Chiron placed both hands on the piano keys. Gently touching the keys, he began to move his fingers with a light, graceful motion, pressing and holding the black and white keys. A clear and enchanting sound from the notes rang out one after another. Vina was so astonished she covered her mouth, her eyes fixed on his hands. She thought in admiration, "I can't believe it. He's playing it all wrong. But there's no hesitation in his keystrokes at all. Should I stop him?" Vina broke into a sweat watching Chiron play as a thought ran through her mind. She focused on the piece he was playing, her expression no longer stiff. It's strange. He's playing it completely wrong. Although the sound wasn't perfect and was a bit chaotic, she still enjoyed it. But then, suddenly, Vina noticed something. Her eyes widened in amazement as she watched his hands move skillfully across the keyboard. She was stunned to realize, but it's also completely identical. Chiron seemed to melt into the melody of the music. In that moment, she realized that he could perfectly imitate the feeling of the piece she had just played. The synchronicity in every note truly astonished and bewildered her. His eyes suddenly glowed with an emerald light. Chiron seemed to fall into a matrix of musical notes. He and she sat in the center, the dim light creating a magical and captivating space. Under his deft hands, melodies and sounds continued to pour forth one after another. His hands glided elegantly and lightly over the keys, the notes seeming to dance all around them. With every key Chiron's fingers pressed down, a sparkling light appeared, further emphasizing his grace and subtlety. At this point, Vina's brows furrowed and her eyes grew serious. It was as if he was now on the right track. She thought pensively, "It's starting to sound more accurate now." His hands rose and fell, moving ceaselessly, just like a true artist. She sat, listening intently and savoring every melody he painted. Vina stared, stunned, at the man before her. What was happening right in front of her was truly hard to believe. An indescribable feeling welled up inside her. What is this? You can't even call this a performance. But it's like he can clairvoyantly feel the very essence of it. Vina observed Chiron's every gesture and action, and questions continued to form in her mind. Why is this boy a butler? Especially when he carries himself like a nobleman. He saw her pensive expression and realized, "I'm sorry, I just—" Before he could finish, his sentence was cut off by Ryan's scream. "Would you stop being so noisy, you detestable gremlin?" His shout tore through the melodious, gentle atmosphere, and Chiron couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. Ryan had an annoyed look on his face. There was a hint of anger in his eyes. He stood in the doorway of Vina's room, scratching inside his shirt and revealing a firm six-pack body. He continued to yell, "You're home, so just rest. Why do you have to act so crazy?" Looking into the room, aside from her, the person next to her also irritated him. He looked at Chiron with surprise and confusion. "Hey, you're here too? Chiron found himself in this awkward situation with Ryan. Chiron's expression was a bit shy and ashamed. He answered awkwardly, Yes. That's right." Vina, sitting beside him, was also bewildered, not quite understanding the situation. She asked, surprised, "Huh? You two know each other?" While Ryan stood frozen, Chiron looked from him to her with an embarrassed expression. He stammered, No, well..." He didn't know how to answer the question. He was sweating bullets as a sense of unease rose within him. Is my friendship with Ryan going to be exposed? Why do I feel like I'm committing a crime? Behind them, Ryan scratched himself and said nonchalantly, "Oh, Chiron." He now seemed completely awake. His eyes lit up as he introduced Chiron to Vina. "He's my friend!" Chiron looked like he'd been frozen solid with fear and collapsed to the floor. His terrified eyes stared at him. "What are you saying, Master Ryan?" He was probably afraid that their friendship being exposed would not be a good thing. He grinned brightly, putting his hands on his hips and facing Vina. Ryan reassured him, "Don't worry. This gremlin witch has a nasty personality, but she doesn't care about stuff like that." Kieran's eyes widened, unable to believe what he'd just heard. His mind was in turmoil. What? How is that possible? How could she not care? As he was trying to figure out how to face her, Vina spoke up first. "So, your name is Chiron, is it?" She knelt down beside him, her attitude gentle and caring. She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Don't worry. If Ryan says you two are friends, then that's fine. That kid is a bit of a pain, but he's a man of his word." Her reaction was beyond his imagination. It made him feel somewhat anxious. Vina didn't care whether he and Ryan were friends or not, but what made her most curious were his thoughts. "So, what were you thinking about while you were playing? I'm dying to know." Her words startled him. A million question marks popped up in his head. He had no idea what she was getting at, and her question took him completely by surprise. "A fan of what? Of Sirens playing? And here I thought you were going crazy in here after seeing all this." 16 years of logic were collapsing. The walls of his beliefs shattered in an instant. He couldn't help but wonder, doesn't he care that his sister is befriending a commoner? Siren turned to look at him. "And Rian, why did you lie? Your sister is a beautiful and kind lady." Hearing his words, she couldn't help but be amused, but contrary to her expression, Rian's face turned pale. He looked serious, his eyes holding a hint of fear. "What are you talking about? Don't let her fool you. She's a witch. Who knows when she'll stalk you and swallow you whole?" Hearing this, Siron was taken aback. She leaned in close to him, covered her mouth with her hand, and gave an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that. My little brother can be a bit childish. I'm glad he has you as a friend. Please look after him for me." He looked at Jenna's smiling face and replied, "It's no problem at all, miss. Actually, I'm the one who's indebted to him." Her enthusiasm made him blush. Rena showered Siren with praise. "Oh my, you're so adorable." Seeing this, Rian flashed a sly, cute smile. "If that's the case, why don't you keep him here? We could have him join our family while we're at it." Rena was surprised by Rian's suggestion. She gave an interested smile. "Getting so close. Aren't you afraid he'll steal your big sister away from you?" Rian laughed gleefully. "What are you talking about? You're not the one I'm worried about. It's Siren." As soon as he finished, a hand grabbed him tightly by the collar. The two of them started fighting. She didn't hold back at all, not even caring that he was her little brother. She fought with all her might. "Just because I'm quiet, you think you're so tough, huh?" The two of them wrestled on the floor. Ryan couldn't take it anymore and cried out, "Ow, ow, that hurts!" Siren just stood there watching the siblings fight, a jumble of thoughts making him feel completely lost. Just when he thought he was starting to understand nobles, they became even more incomprehensible. After getting beaten up, Rian sulked resentfully and yelled at her, "Why are you home? You just left for your break not long ago." She casually dusted off her hands. "You don't know? GI is preparing for the certification exam. I came to pick him up. We're leaving tomorrow, and Father went to visit a friend. He'll be back later." Rian's jaw dropped in disbelief. "What? That's insane!" He lowered his head, his voice trailing off. "So, the gap is that big, huh?" He saw that Rian seemed heartbroken, and her words kept replaying in his mind. The certification exam was a standard and a requirement for mages and swordsmen to be officially recognized. Not just within the kingdom, but across the entire continent. Everywhere. Over 1,000 people attempted it each year, but no more than 30 would succeed each time. There was also a provisional license. If you graduated from a kingdom-certified academy, like the Anfia's Magic Academy, you had a chance to become a 10th rank provisional mage. After earning achievement points through organizations and guilds, you could rise in rank. Hundreds, even thousands of people flocked here. The lines of people stretched so far you couldn't see the end. But wherever there's money and fame, people will naturally gather, even with just a provisional license. People still endlessly desire that certified license. That was the legendary exam GI was about to take at the age of 18. Ryan was full of awe and admiration. A genius is truly on another level. And they have the full backing of their family, too. He sighed, his mood sinking. Vina walked over to him and patted his head comfortingly. "It's all right. I'm going to go prepare dinner. It's seafood from the royal palace, so I have to prepare it myself." She turned to him and gave a bright smile. It was great meeting you, Siren. Let's see each other again. He stared at her, dazed. Yes. Have a good day, miss. He thought to himself, will I ever get the chance to see her again? He remembered the scene from earlier when she taught him how to play the piano. That feeling was incredible. He didn't know if he would ever be able to see her again. Because I'm leaving the mansion tomorrow. Rena went outside, leaving Siren and Rian behind. He turned to him and began hesitantly, Rian, your sister. Rian looked at him. Huh? Siren gazed into the distance, his eyes determined, and asked him, does she have a boyfriend? His question made Rian freeze, stunned for a moment. Seeing his expression, Siren knew he'd messed up. He quickly tried to backtrack. It's nothing! Rian grinned from ear to ear, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Siren reacted quickly to his attitude. I was just curious. Forget I asked. Besides, before he could finish his sentence, Ryan bolted out the door, yelling for Rena. Sis! Siren knew what was about to happen and shouted after him, I said it was nothing! He clenched his teeth, an anxious look on his face as he watched Rian about to run out the door. He quickly chased after him, panic flooding his heart. He cursed himself for his slip of the tongue and for feeling so sad. Meanwhile, Ryan ran outside as fast as he could, not forgetting his mission as he yelled, Hey, sis! Sharon has a question for you. Ryan stood on the upper floor, grabbing the railing and leaning over to shout, If you have a boyfriend? Rena was leading the maids to prepare the meal from the royal palace. His shout echoed throughout the hall. Rian's question rang out once more. Do you have a boyfriend? The question made everyone turn around in shock to look at him. Siren came up from behind, clamped a hand tightly over Rian's mouth and pulled him back, causing him to let out a series of muffled, surprised sounds. Upstairs, he was holding him tight and covering his mouth. The muffled, strange sounds made everyone downstairs whisper and gossip. Huh? What's going on? Are they lovers? Her heart was pounding. When the maid turned to look at her, all she could do was force a smile to hide her embarrassment and shame. She let out a laugh and said to them, They're just messing with each other, don't mind them. Vina and the maids continued on their way. As she walked, she said, Now we've finished separating the poison. Now we need to steam it. They all replied in unison, Yes, my lady. Behind a nearby wall, the head butler had been standing there for a long time. He had seen everything that just happened. He called to the person behind him, Haynes, does the young master have a guest today? The man bowed his head. Nothing was scheduled beforehand, head butler. Upstairs, Rian was about to say more, but Siren said, He says he saw you about to cause trouble again. He quickly pulled his hand back. The head butler spoke coldly to the man. I've heard that voice before. Now I remember. He turned his head, his gaze as sharp as a knife. He ordered his subordinate, Tell Timurin to come to my office at once. He glared and then yelled, Immediately! The sky was clear and blue. The forest was covered by a canopy of tall trees. The sounds of Ryan's breathing and training echoed through the air. A voice shouted, Stop! Take a 10-minute break! He was so tired he could barely breathe. In his left hand he held a training staff. His right hand constantly wiped away sweat. Ket watched him and stroked his beard, thinking about the boy. He's become more passionate again. It's been about a year, hasn't it? Watching him train so fervently, he remembered how quickly the boy used to lose heart. He glanced at him, lost in thought. But I'm sure once Giai gets to the royal palace, the kid will change. The problem is mastering the technique. Beads of sweat rolled down Rian's face. Suddenly, a frantic voice called out, Young master! Startled, he glanced toward the sound. A man wearing a hat ran toward him, looking hurried and anxious. His voice carried from a distance. Young master, Lady Rena requests your immediate return to the mansion. He was about to lift a water flask to his lips, but was annoyed by the man's words. Her. If this is about praising my brother, I'm not interested. Tell her to do whatever she wants. The servant denied it emphatically. No, sir. The young lady said that Siren is in danger. He could die. Hearing this, he immediately spat out the water in his mouth. Rian stood up, flask in hand, and looked at the servant with an impatient and worried expression. What? Why, I thought he was going home today. The servant, having run so fast, knelt down, gasping for breath. The head butler reported it to the head of the family. I don't know the details, but the young lady said it's because of his relationship with you. Rian hastily grabbed his coat and threw it on. Impatiently, he turned back to Ket and said, Master, I have to go see my father. Seeing his expression, the old man knew something was wrong. He pressed, What happened? Ryan, a little flustered, replied, "A butler named Siren is my friend, and somehow Father found out. There's not much time." Feeling incredibly anxious, he said to the old man, "I'm sure Father will forgive him if I can just convince him. I'll train later." As soon as the words left his mouth, the old man spoke up, stopping him. "You can't." He stopped, stood up straight, and looked at the old man. Not believing his ears, he asked again, "Why not?" The old man picked up his sword and stood in front of Rian. Rian exclaimed, "Master!" The magnificent, splendid mansion lay before a vast mountain range. Inside the main hall of the mansion, Siren was kneeling. Male and female servants stood in rows on both sides. Seated on the central chair was the head of the Bishop family. On either side of him were Lady Gina and young Master Gi. Behind them stood the head butler. He knelt on the floor, his heart racing with anxiety. The man's imposing voice rang out with authority. "Siren." Aryan Bishop radiated an air of high nobility. He held a report in his hand and looked at him with anger. "You will be executed." The entire grand hall was shaken. Everyone began to whisper incessantly. How could this be happening? The maids couldn't help but feel worried and afraid. One leaned close to another's ear and whispered, "How dare a commoner do such a thing to a noble?" The whispers, soft and loud, grew more frequent. Another one remarked that he didn't know his place. No matter how ignorant you are, you should at least know these basic rules. Every word of judgment and assessment was heard. Timurin heard it all. He merely glanced at the maids without saying a word. The three people sat on the long bench. Bishop held the document in his hand, completely focused on it. Jai, sitting beside them, looked somewhat arrogant and unconcerned. Only Gina was anxious. She was on pins and needles with so much she wanted to say to her father. Unable to hold it in any longer, Vina spoke up, her voice anxious and urgent. "Father, wait. I have something I need to tell you." He questioned her as he flipped through the documents in his hand. "What else is there to talk about?" He carefully examined the stack of documents provided by the head butler. Rows of servants stood in neat lines, all of them trembling with fear. Lord Bishop used a stack of documents to accuse him, testimonies from numerous servants. They confirmed that this brat behaved with great disrespect in front of Ryan. He turned to Jenna and questioned her. "You've already read the contract in detail, so you should have no objections. Is there anything else you wish to say?" At that moment, Siron, with his head bowed, hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "I want to ask something." He raised his head to look at the man, his eyes cautious. "If the young master and I are friends, then what will happen to the young master?" All the servants were utterly horrified. Every one of them thought, "He's done for this time, this guy. Does he not even understand the situation he's in? He should be begging for his life. He's furious. How dare you ask me that?" Vina looked at her father, then back at him. In such a life-or-death situation, he still had the courage to ask about Rian. She wondered to herself, is he worried about Rian? Even in a situation like this. He flew into a rage, cursing him without restraint. "You foolish commoner! Do you really think anything would happen to a noble for messing around with someone like you?" Shirin lowered his head, sighed, and then smiled. He looked up straight at the man and declared loud and clear for all to hear, "Yes, Rian and I are friends." He confessed once more, "We've been friends for a year now, and we will always be friends." The servants were terrified to hear these words from his own mouth. They stammered in fear, This guy." A murderous glint appeared in the man's eyes. The servants couldn't help but wonder, "Why aren't you scared at all?" Using a scornful tone, he warned him, "That's right. It seems you look down on the name Ozen." Bishop lost his composure and yelled, "Head butler, deal with him quickly! Don't let any news of this get out." He handed a stack of documents to the head butler, who bowed respectfully and took them from his hand. Two soldiers stepped forward, each grabbing an arm to take him away for punishment. Vina shouted to stop her father. "Father, wait, please listen to me." She bowed low. Her face couldn't hide her worry and fear towards her enraged father. He saw her speaking up against his decision. He turned his fury on her. "He has confessed, and I have made my decision. As the head of this house, once I have made a decision, I will not take it back." The servants were on pins and needles, each one worried for their own pathetic life. The blonde-haired one, feeling it was unjust, turned to the head butler. "Head butler, isn't this going a bit too far?" The chubby man next to him couldn't stand it either and decided to speak up to protect himself. There's no reason all of us should die for one person. The blonde-haired man's face darkened with fear upon hearing this. He grimaced and explained, "This family is our life. To protect it, we must eliminate any conflict that arises, no matter how small." As Chiron was led away by the two men, he watched them go and spoke cryptically. "You may see this as wrong now, but one day you'll be grateful for this choice." Suddenly, the doors burst open. A shout echoed throughout the mansion's grand hall. "I won't let that happen!" Rian appeared, looking rushed and frantic. In his hand, he held his master's sword. Vina was overjoyed, her face unable to hide her delight. "He's finally back!" Her heart, which had been hanging in suspense, could finally rest. She called out, "Ryan!" Contrary to her hopeful expectation, Bishop's face darkened. He crossed his arms grimly, looking at his son without a hint of happiness. Chiron looked up at him, but unlike Vina, there was no hope in his eyes, only resignation, ready to accept any punishment that came his way. Perhaps he was afraid of implicating him. Filled with impatience and anger, Ryan yelled uncontrollably, "Who dares to kill my friend without my permission?" The man looked at him, cold and resolute. He spoke calmly, "I do." That single word was enough to show his authority and status in this family. Down below, Rian used every word he could to defend him. He couldn't understand how simply being friends with him could lead to such a bitter end, trading his life for their friendship. He confronted his father. "Why? He hasn't committed any capital crime. All he did was become friends with me." Vina stood up anxiously, unable to stop worrying about him and her little brother. Her father saw that his own son dared to question him over a mere commoner. He held human life so cheaply. One does not need to commit a capital crime to deserve death. Matters concerning the nobility are complex, far more than you could ever imagine. Ryan, unyielding, shouted back in anger, his words as sharp as steel. "Our family is dealing with this complex situation, and I am enjoying the privilege of being a nobleman's son. If that privilege forces me to kill my friend, then I don't want it." Bishop stared at him with a tyrannical gaze. He imposed his own views on others, his words dripping with classism. "How childish. You ask why he must die? To befriend a noble means the relationship must be one of equals." Chiron was being escorted by two guards. His indifferent gaze and his earlier bold declaration only infuriated the man more. Seeing him, he spoke words of insult without a second thought. "Do you truly believe that commoner thinks of you as a friend? On what grounds? There are many in this world who wish to take advantage of the nobility," Rian shouted, vehemently rejecting his father's condescending words. "Chiron would never do that." The man looked at him sideways, his words growing impatient. "Is that so?" Bishop looked at him, his harsh words striking at his son's psyche. "How can I believe you?" "Here, prove it. Show me that you and Chiron are truly friends." His father's words left him stunned. He stood there dumbfounded. "Prove it?" He couldn't help but a worry in his heart. He thought to himself, "Oh no, I'm screwed." Standing to the side, Vina also couldn't believe her father would ask such a thing. She looked at him tensely. He was staring intently at her brother, a smirk on his face, his eyes full of smug satisfaction. Rian's thoughts were a tangled mess. If I say I can't prove it, so this is how it all ends. Pressured by the man's question, he hesitated for a moment. Finally, he spoke his true feelings, wondering if a person's feelings could even be proven. He fell into a state of confused contemplation, feeling that he couldn't afford to speak carelessly. He tried to put himself in his friend's shoes. If he were Siren, he could have easily defeated that man. Suddenly, a thought struck him. If he were Siren... He glanced over at his friend, at that carefree and relaxed face, without a single trace of worry or fear, but his gaze was utterly steadfast and strong. Looking at him, he fell into deep thought again. That gaze... It looked as if it was taking everything in, a gaze just like the one he had when he sparred with me. Rian looked straight into those eyes, and it was as if his friend was guiding him, helping him remember every word he had said before. "Rian, sometimes not focusing on the small details yields better results." He followed the stream of memories back to when they were playing cards together, when his own hand wasn't what he'd hoped for. As he rested his head on his hand, looking bored and disinterested, his friend was holding the ace of spades. He instructed him not to focus on the small parts of his opponent's play, but instead to look at the whole picture. He had doubted his friend's words. "Look at the whole picture?" Siron flipped over the ace of spades and showed it to him. "That way you'll be able to see their true intentions." He committed it to memory. Rian felt a surge of courage. Look at the whole picture. Look at the whole picture of the person standing right in front of me now. Father. He was a second-rank noble, head of the Ocean family, a black-haired, fourth-level certified Grand Minister, and a knight. He gripped the sword his master had given him tightly. He affirmed it in his heart. That's right. This isn't like an argument between a father and son. This is a sword duel. Back to 30 minutes ago when he received the news and was about to leave. But his master stopped him. He yelled at the old man, "Master, why won't you let me go?" My friend, he could die. The old man ignored his urgency, remaining perfectly calm and composed. Indeed. You're talking about the kid who works in the library, aren't you? Ket hesitated, then continued. But that kid is a commoner. He was stunned, speechless, upon hearing the old man say those words. Master, I never knew you were that kind of person. You're the one who taught me. Master, he said in disbelief. The man he had always respected with all his heart held the same tyrannical and archaic beliefs as his own father. At that moment, his spirit completely shattered. He lost control and screamed out the feelings in his heart. If we could just talk things out by raising our swords, then anyone could be my friend. Ket calmly looked at his student. The old man began to lecture him. Rian, don't you know what is most important to a noble? Aren't nobles supposed to eliminate anything that threatens their family's position? The old man explained to him all the disadvantages to his family. Have you ever considered the weight your friend carries when his worth is equivalent to that of a fly? Or did you just befriend him without a second thought? Upon hearing the old man's words, he clenched his jaw, choking back his emotions as his shoulders trembled. Tears rolled uncontrollably down his cheeks. Each teardrop that fell seemed to prove his helplessness and the pain in his heart. Ket advised him, his voice low and warm, yet firm. Don't even think about resolving this through debate. Rian clenched his hands into fists, his fingers tightening relentlessly. He spoke to the old man. His tone was filled with determination, but his helplessness was also visible. But I can't just stand here and do nothing. I was the one who asked to be his friend first. Rian raised his hand, his eyes burning with intense resolve, and shouted at the old man, I don't want to become a coward! His words at that moment seemed to defy adversity. His determination was clear in every gesture, every look. Ket looked at him with a different expression. He silently praised him. Good determination. The boy is sentimental, honest, and pure. But you can't become a great swordsman like that. I have high hopes for you, and I will be cheering you on. Ket held his own sword out in front of the boy and offered it to him. Take it. Thankfully, the old man wasn't actually the archaic, class-prejudiced type of person. The old man also instructed and warned him, I will let you go if you bring this back with you. But if you're not even mentally prepared for this, and don't even dream of taking a single step out of here. He took the sword from his master, his eyes fixed on it, reflecting his steadfast and serious resolve. Rian now had to make a choice that was true to his own beliefs. His eyes lit up, carrying his unwavering confidence and determination. Master, I will never forget this favor. His every word was like a sacred vow, etched into his heart and mind, becoming the driving force for him to move forward and face this challenge. The old man glanced at him. Remember this. Abandoning a friend is like abandoning a part of your own body. His words were both a reminder and a warning. His inner world was now a raging storm. This was a sword duel where his own life was on the line. Back in the present, in front of the mansion's great hall, realizing the truth his treacherous master had taught him, Rian threw his head back and laughed boisterously, his sword in hand. The laughter echoed through the mansion, giving everyone goosebumps. Like father, like son, you were almost defeated by him. And you call that proof that we're friends? He roared in fury. My belief is enough, because I believe that Siren and I are friends. He added that the existence of Siren's friend, him, was proof of their bond. Bitchop was livid at these sharp-witted rebuttals. He gritted his teeth and hissed, Absurd! This isn't some father-son argument, he roared angrily. Even as we speak, the reputation of countless families is collapsing. His words stunned the servants. He continued his frantic tirade. If it means avoiding the family's ruin, I would even be willing to disown my own son. The moment he said it, she and a group of maids were horrified. Vina had to scream, Father! Rian stood up straight, his posture resolute. His voice was firm, without a hint of hesitation. If I must do that in exchange for my friend's life. He bowed, placing his right hand on his chest, using the most solemn and respectful posture to state his position, then I will gladly leave. Everyone was terrified by his action. Bitchop, enraged, shot to his feet, his hands clenched so tightly the veins bulged. He just roared at the boy. "You brat, draw your sword! If you truly think that kid is your friend, then bet your life on it right here and now!" Without a moment's hesitation, he drew his sword. The sharp ring of the blade seemed to announce that their father-son relationship was about to be severed. His father couldn't believe his eyes. His own son would draw a sword and fight him for a commoner. He looked at him and stammered, "Rian, you would even raise your sword against your own father?" He held the sword before him, its tip pointing to the sky, a sharp glint in his eyes. "I am not pointing my sword at you, father. I am merely demonstrating my conviction." Bitchop clutched his chest, feigning helplessness. "How could you possibly have friends? You can't even get along with the other noble families. Perhaps it's because you can't reach the level of the other nobles." He was trying to manipulate Rian again. "You're just keeping someone weaker than you around, to comfort yourself. But no." He lowered his voice. "This time, father, you are wrong." His eyes seemed to burn with fire, steady and unshakable. His gaze carried both confidence and self-belief. He lowered his sword and said to him with absolute certainty, "Siren is my friend, and he is better than me. I want to help Siren so he can shine brightly in a higher position." His decisiveness left even him stunned. Bitchop, flushed with anger, pointed a finger at him. "Did you deceive my boy?" he demanded furiously. "Did you convince him that a commoner could be friends with a noble?" His words were like a sharp knife stabbing Siren's pride. "That's not," he denied, but Rian stepped in front of him, his voice filled with a desire to shield and protect him. "Siren, stay put." "I will protect you." Siran knew this was a decisive moment, not just for himself, but for the friendship he cherished. He called his name directly. "Rian!" Hearing his name, Ryan froze. He spoke up, taking all the blame. "You don't have to take responsibility for this, my lord. I will take responsibility for my part." He whipped his head around in shock to look at him. Siran remembered the moment Rian's hand reached out for his. "From the moment you wanted to be my friend, I had a feeling that I would one day stand at a crossroads and have to choose between being your friend or saving my own life." His eyes filled with gratitude as he looked at him. "Even if it means I die here, I don't regret becoming your friend." Rian bowed his head, his eyes welling with tears. His friend's sincere feelings had not disappointed him. His voice choked with emotion. "That's right." Suddenly, he raised his face and shouted towards Bitchop, "That's exactly what I mean!" The words echoed like a powerful affirmation of their friendship and his unshakable resolve. His heart filled with faith and will, knowing he had made the right choice, Rian yelled. He reaffirmed his friendship with him once more. "Even if I am cast out, we will still be friends." His powerful, steely words left his father speechless, able only to grimace as he watched. Vina, standing to one side, was also moved to tears by these sincere words. She thought to herself, even if we are immature, we are still human beings with feelings. A true friend never turns their back on you. The servants were also touched, every one of them crying. Everyone has a friend like that. Those barriers make them forever lose their own right to equality. The head butler glanced towards Ryan and Siren. He watched them, then clicked his tongue. Tsk! Suddenly, a hearty laugh echoed throughout the mansion. "How interesting!" Everyone below looked up in astonishment. Vina cried out joyfully, "Grandfather!" Glam stood on the upper floor looking down, full of life. He praised them with amusement. "I didn't think I would get to witness such a moving scene. Now that I'm at death's door, youth truly is the best." Vina was overjoyed and couldn't help but sigh in relief. Everything's going to be okay now. If her grandfather was involved, she thought things could be handled more easily. But contrary to her attitude, Bitchop's expression was anything but natural. He looked at Glam suspiciously. "Father, you're here?" "Vina told me it would be a few more days," he announced. "I'm here early because a friend of mine ran off with a young lady." After speaking, he sat down. Siron was also very surprised by his appearance, staring blankly in his direction as he unconsciously realized the man's identity. That man was a general of Tomia and a third-class swordsman, Rian's grandfather. He sat with his legs crossed comfortably, his voice full of excitement. "Anyway, this place is as noisy as ever, huh? Youth truly is a wonderful thing." He was the former head of the Clampagen family, While he was laughing and talking with everyone, the current family head, his son, did not look pleased at all. He looked distressed as he spoke to the old man. In this situation, it's not so wonderful, father. Our family's image has been completely ruined. He paid no mind to his son's appearance, looking excitedly towards the people in the grand hall. Let's not jump to conclusions. I've been standing in the back watching for quite a while now, and it's clear that everyone here has a lot to say. So before we decide whether we've lost face, why don't we hear each other's opinions first? He called for the opinion of the first person. Witness number 1, eldest daughter, Vina Ozen. She was visibly delighted to be able to express her thoughts about him. Even though yesterday was the first time I met Siren, I could already tell that he is a very intelligent and talented young man. She stood and presented like an orator, and everyone there turned their eyes toward her. They listened intently to her assessment of him. The old man crossed his legs, rested his chin on his hand with an expression of anticipation as his granddaughter gave her opinion. Furthermore, Siron has fulfilled all the requirements of the contract, and he was supposed to leave the family today. Considering these circumstances, it's hard to say that Siren approached Rian with any specific malicious intent, and as a result, I do not believe his actions have tarnished the family's honor. The old man stroked his chin as if he understood her point. He let out a cold snort. Well then, if that's the case, what do you think, my second grandson? The next person to give their opinion was witness number 2, the second son, Jai Ozen. A moment ago, although he hadn't spoken, his expression showed no goodwill towards him at all. He scowled, his words hissing through his teeth. I don't like that kid. Baichop at his side was very pleased with this answer. He gave a smug smile, silently praising his second son in his head. That's right. I knew I could count on you, Jai. But he had never paid attention to or cared about matters that didn't concern him. However, this has nothing to do with me. This non-committal statement somewhat astonished the man. Mixed with a bit of disappointment, he exclaimed, What? Baichop's face darkened as he turned to his indecisive son, his tone somewhat reproachful. What do you mean? You say you don't like him, and then you say you don't care? He crossed his arms, leaned back in his chair with his eyes slightly closed, and spoke with an apathetic attitude. That's right, I don't like the kid, but who Rian makes friends with has nothing to do with me. He added bluntly, I simply want this to be over, so that we can depart for the royal palace. Rena was also very surprised by Jai's attitude. Her eyes lit up with admiration. Wow, my little brother's got an attitude. The old man laughed heartily. This second grandson's opinion. This is exactly why there's no place like home. He stroked his chin, then looked towards Ryan. Well then, to conclude, let's hear the opinion of the person who has surely observed the child Siren for the longest time. He called the next person. The vice butler. The next person was witness number 3, Vice Butler Tamura. He cleared his throat, but then his attention fell upon the head butler. He was raising a hand near his chin, signaling him. In his heart, the head butler thought, he's surely aware of it. Looking at Baichop's attitude, his eyes were also glancing toward the vice butler. His thoughts were all too clear as he signaled him, We are not people who express opinions, but rather those who obey our master's will. The vice butler finally managed to say his name. Siron. He glanced at the head butler, then spoke his true feelings about him. He did the jobs I assigned him, and he completed them perfectly. Furthermore, he even finished the work a full 6 months ahead of schedule. His words were like a bolt from the blue. To the head butler, he couldn't believe the man hadn't followed his signal. He gritted his teeth. What the hell does he think he's doing? Baichop sat there and sighed, his majestic demeanor from before gradually fading. Clamp looked at the vice butler and asked him, Did you know that those two were friends? He placed a hand on his chest and respectfully answered his master's question. I knew that he often went out with the young master, but I was not aware that the two were friends. But in my opinion, if he were an ill-mannered child, he would not have been able to categorize those 10,000 books. He couldn't believe his ears. He never expected that in this mansion, besides his friend Rian and the kind Lady Jaina, there would be someone else who would take his side and speak well of him. It was the vice butler. Rian glanced at him with a smile. Finally, someone has stepped up to acknowledge his effort and ability. Rena put a hand to her chin, silently rejoicing for him. This is great. The atmosphere has completely changed, but that joy was extinguished when she looked at her father. His gaze toward him hadn't changed at all. He scowled, annoyed that time and time again, as someone had come forward to speak up for him. Especially since Old Man Clamp returned, nothing had been going according to his plan. She also knew that the only person who wanted to punish Saran was her father. Suddenly, a deep, warm, and powerful voice rang out. "No!" The old man stood up, resolute in the words he had just spoken. "I cannot agree to this." As soon as he finished speaking, Xena and Mr. Bishop both spoke up at the same time. "Father! Sir!" Vina didn't understand why he had changed his mind at the last minute. Just when she had started to relax, she was now on pins and needles. As for him, he was beaming. Old Man Clamp quickly corrected himself. No, I understand that the two of them see each other as friends." Siran and Rian stood before him, full of worry and tension. He looked at the two of them and said pensively, "However, it stops here. If this relationship continues, rumors will eventually spread outside, and this could become a weakness for our political rivals to exploit." He listened to his father with rapt attention. Mr. Clamp was clearly articulating all of his concerns. Jaina, sitting next to him, still paid no mind to the whole affair. With a calm demeanor, he began to state his case. "Everyone in our family is a prominent figure in this kingdom. Jaina is even preparing for her certification exam. Furthermore, what am I to do when so many other families depend on us?" The maids, standing at attention, couldn't help but worry for their own and their families' fates upon hearing this. After all, they were commoners. It was an honor just to be able to serve the nobility. "Shiran, you're a smart boy. I trust you'll understand." Gina turned to look at him, wanting to say something, but the words caught in her throat. Rian, however, could no longer sit by and watch. He grit his teeth, his eyes glaring at the old man. His eyes were resolute, refusing to be bound by anything. He looked at his beloved grandson with a sense of exasperation. He couldn't help but think, "I know you have so much potential and intelligence, Ryan, but why can't you understand what I'm saying?" His own heart was in turmoil. He wanted the boy to understand the weight of his responsibilities. "You know how heavy a burden it is to carry the lives of countless people on your shoulders." He then turned to Sharon, wanting to gauge his reaction. He also wanted to see what Rian had learned from this friendship. "What are your thoughts, Sharon? I'd like to thank you for teaching my naive grandson what true friendship is." He didn't want the family's name to be tarnished because of him. He asked for Sharon's opinion. "Can we not end this here?" Sharon could only bow his head, closing his eyes without answering for a long moment. Then, he uttered two words that stunned both Mr. Clamp and Gina. "I can't." Even Bishop was in disbelief that he could be so stubborn, so unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. Jenna, who was usually so indifferent, now looked at him in a new light. Rian was also stunned by his answer, thinking he would beg to save his own life. He thought Sharon would ask for forgiveness and cut all ties with him. He never imagined he could be this courageous. He hesitated, wanting to call out to him. Seeing the sincere, straightforward Sharon before him, he couldn't hold back and called his name without a hint of doubt. "Shiren." He placed a hand on his own chest. Looking at the old man, he spoke from the bottom of his heart. "If I am an obstacle for Ryan, then I don't mind if I never see him again." However, he was no longer hesitant or afraid. He spoke frankly from the heart. "But that doesn't mean I can stop considering him my friend," he declared with unwavering confidence. "Ryan and I are friends. I won't let our friendship be shackled or tainted by anyone else's words." He told Mr. Clamp, "As long as you take that into consideration, I will obey any order you give." Ryan's sword hand was trembling uncontrollably. He felt utterly humiliated, and tears began to fall once more. He was filled with self-reproach. To be honest, a part of me was relieved that Sharon didn't have to die. I really felt that way. But Sharon had shown him that abandoning a friend was like abandoning a part of yourself. Rian's eyes widened as he stared at him, remembering the words his master had taught him during training. It had been so hard for him to make a decision, but as for Sharon, he would rather lose his life than forsake their friendship. Rian felt a deep sense of shame. He made his decision. Very well. After all, this was never up for negotiation. He pointed his sword to the sky, and with a voice like thunder, he shouted decisively, "I hereby declare!" Mr. Clamp and Gina were instantly terrified of what he would do next. "Don't!" Gina screamed. "I don't know what you're thinking, little brother, but please don't." She reacted this way because she had no idea if her impetuous little brother was making a rational decision. Even the slightest mistake could have huge consequences for his fate and that of the entire family. She couldn't let him make such a reckless decision. He knelt, plunging his sword deep into the tile floor. The sound of the impact was deafening. To Chiron's astonishment, he declared bluntly in front of everyone, "I, Rian Ozen, third son of the Ozen family, from this moment forth, shall become Chiron's sword." His oath thundered through the tense, suffocating air, making his father tremble with rage. He ground his teeth, his face contorted into an ugly grimace. "What?" he roared. "You damn brat!" The entire mansion seemed to shake with the force of his fury. His roar echoed through every corner. "You fool!" The origin of the Knight's Oath dates back to the founding of the Tomiya Kingdom. During a chaotic period, nations large and small alike fought for control of the Atofi territory. The strongest among them succeeded in unifying them all and declared the founding of the Tomiya Kingdom. However, the newly formed kingdom had to stand against other nations, powerful neighboring nations. Therefore, instead of being purged during the unification, the defeated kings were allowed to continue ruling their own lands. And it was through this process that the Knight's Oath was created. The defeated kings would have to kneel before the new sovereign. They swore to become a sword that only their master could wield. In return, they were granted noble status. This was the origin of the Knight's Oath, and indeed the very birth of the aristocracy. Thus, to break this oath would make one a being more despicable than a rabid dog. Rian turned to the others, a mischievous grin on his face. "So what do you all think? Can't exactly take it back now, can I?" Everyone was frozen in stunned silence, their mouths agape at his shocking decision. He remained kneeling on one knee, his hand still gripping the sword tightly. Right now, he couldn't help but blame himself. "Oh, master. It seems I've caused a huge disaster this time." Ryan also pictured his master getting furious and scolding him. "I didn't give you the sword to do this." Chiron knelt beside him. He took his hand. He panicked. "Ryan, what in the world are you doing?" He didn't answer, but glanced towards everyone. Old Man Clam's voice rang out, his face hardening, his features becoming even more resolute. "Rian, if I am truly witnessing this, and you say you will become his sword, then that boy must be worthy of it, mustn't he? Answer me." He helped him stand. The two of them looked at the old man. He continued to ask, "Is he really that talented? Or is he only talented in your eyes because you yourself are a useless person?" Hearing this, he relaxed a bit. He gave a confident smile, placed a hand on his chest, and shouted, "A sword does not judge. It only protects." Everyone's faces darkened when they heard his answer. Even Chiron was surprised. Suddenly, a long laugh erupted in the tense space. He put a hand to his face and laughed so heartily that his whole body shook. He had to admit the boy was right. "That's right, you immature brats. You have to go at least this far to reach the top, right?" While his father helplessly face-palmed, his grandfather praised him endlessly. "You've got quite the mouth on you. But with that mediocre swordsmanship of yours, I feel sorry for your friend for having to accept a sword like you." Rian couldn't believe his grandfather's words. All he could do was stammer, Grandfather." The old man placed a hand on Chiron's shoulder. He smiled, comforting and reminding him, "That's enough. That's enough. It's all over now. Although the boy isn't the sharpest sword yet, Chiron, he will never betray you. Take good care of my grandson." He patted his shoulder. He closed his eyes, savoring this moment. He looked at the old man with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, sir, for acknowledging me." The old man pointed at the head butler and ordered him, "The two of them have sworn to be friends for life, so I can't just let you leave like this." Head butler used the carriage that Chiron was supposed to take home and bring his parents here. He quickly accepted the order. Yes, right away!" The two young men looked at each other and smiled. They both put on their hats. The head butler was still in shock. In his heart, he screamed, "For real?" Looking up at the clear blue sky, the clouds drifted lazily by. He was helpless, even in his own thoughts. "I'll never know what the hell nobles are thinking." Rian finally relaxed. He smiled comfortably and couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah, so refreshing." He flopped onto the bed, stretching out both arms. He also sat down beside him. He smiled and asked, "Did you see the look on my family's faces?" "It was awesome." He felt incredibly guilty. "Ryan, the Knight's Oath. You didn't have to do that for me." He shot up, startling him a little. "Chiron, I didn't do it because you're my friend." His eyes locked onto him, determination burning within them. "I'm different from your older brother. You have the power to draw others to you. I simply chose to bet my life on a person like that." He blushed, a little embarrassed. What? At that moment, he felt a bit ashamed, thinking to himself, why did you have to say something like that all of a sudden? He looked at him and sighed, I feel so much pressure. He blushed as he said to him, But, if you want to protect me, you'll have to train much harder. His words made him so upset he could have coughed up blood. Seeing this, he asked with concern, What? What's wrong? He looked deflated. It's nothing. You just hit me right where it hurts. Rena suddenly burst into the room. She said loudly, Rian, is it true you swore the knight's oath to become Shiren's sword? Stepping inside, she saw him collapsed in a pool of blood. She asked about his condition. What's wrong with him? He used his remaining strength to tell her, Get out. Shiren objected. What are you saying? Just a moment ago your sister helped us so much. He invited her in. Please come in. She was haughty. That's right. I've brought important information from the opposition. He immediately sobered up, a hint of worry in his voice. What is it? What are father and grandfather doing? She sat down gently on the bed and told the two of them, They are indeed bloodthirsty, but in the end, you played your knight's oath card. They're planning their next move, so anyway, she told him some very important news. Father is thinking about enrolling you and Shiren in the Kaizen Sword Academy. Shiren, you said your talent with the sword is incredible, didn't you? You said it with your own mouth. He was bewildered. But to that extent? She smiled. Of course. You're a member of the family now. I told all of them about your talent to see if any of them might volunteer to invest something in you. They want your talent to be of use. Rian, they must be trying to help you succeed for your own future. After hearing that, he yelled at her, Without my permission, who dared to let him come to this school? Just when I finally got to play as much as I wanted, she kicked me to the ground without a word, stepped on me, sighed, and then yelled at me without a shred of mercy. You thick-headed bastard. After causing all this chaos, what else do you want to do? He shouted back defiantly. He turned his head and glared at her with eyes as sharp as knives. He yelled at her, Besides, Siren isn't even going to the Swordsmanship Academy. In the future, Siren will be a mage. He's already awakened his spirit zone. She stared at him in astonishment, full of doubt. What? A spirit zone? Siren's awakened it? Wait a minute. It means you swore a knight's oath to a future mage? She looked at him, barely believing her ears. He yelled back in a fit of rage, There's a limit to how useless you can be. Get out of here now, you old hag. Thinking about Siren and Rena's duel, Rena spoke up. So, you used synesthesia to sense the spiritual world and read my movements to win. She rubbed her chin and mused, That's a clever idea. Since the energy of your spiritual world is quite high, it should be possible. Shiren answered awkwardly. Is that so? Vina praised him endlessly. You're amazing. From what I learned at school, the more condensed the energy, the more stable the spiritual world. And to be able to maintain that density while using a sword. It is incredibly amazing. Hearing those words, his cheeks flushed red. He gently rubbed his hair. Vina and Rin shared the same thought. He's embarrassed just from that? The woman said, I will speak to the master about Siren's path. Of course, the condition of his admission to the swordsmanship school will be included. Hearing this, Ryan was startled and shouted, What? Then what will happen to my master? Rena replied, Master Keth already knows about this. So yesterday he terminated the contract. Tomorrow morning is when he will say his goodbyes. He was even more shocked. Huh? Rian gripped the sword in his hand, his mind filled with sorrow. He thought of his master. That man was about to leave this land for good. A butler opened the door, came in, and announced, Young Master Siren, your family has arrived and is waiting in the drawing room. The master of the house said you may go see them first if you wish. Rena gently turned to ask his thoughts. What do you think, Siren? At first he just smiled, but then he couldn't hide his emotions anymore. Overjoyed, he shot to his feet and exclaimed, I'll go. Siren ran down the stairs so quickly that two butlers had to call out in concern. The stairs! Be careful of the stairs, Siren said, a bit awkwardly. You can just talk to me like you used to. Acting so formal feels a little strange. They replied frantically, tripping over their words. Good heavens, we can't! Please don't say such things, my lord. We'll lose our positions. He smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. But they still adamantly refused. Even so, we cannot. After a few short minutes, they all arrived at the door of the reception room. Kiran hastily pushed the door open to look inside, where his most beloved people were. Seeing the two people inside, he immediately shouted, Mom! Dad! Overcome with emotion, they called out his name in unison. Chiron! He seemed to forget everything else. rushing towards them like a little bird finding its nest. Finally, he buried himself in the warmth of his parents' arms. The three of them held each other tightly in a wave of happiness. Siren looked at his family, his heart aching. "They've gotten thinner. You two must have had such a hard time tossing and turning day after day worrying about me." Shiren's mother, tearing up, reassured him, "Don't worry, your father and I are just fine." Vincent asked, "But why did you suddenly call for us? If your work was done, you should have just come home." He suddenly became agitated and asked insistently, "They're not forcing you to stay, are they? They're not preventing you from coming home, right?" He explained, "No, that's not it. It's just, I've been given a very good opportunity." His father didn't understand. Siren's mother was also puzzled. "A good opportunity?" He replied, "It's..." Then, he told his family the entire story from beginning to end. After hearing it all, they were completely stunned. Everyone looked dazed, frozen to the spot. Vincent's eyes were wide open, his whole body motionless as he stared at his son. Then he forced a smile and said, "So, what you mean is you became friends with a young master from a noble family while working in the library, and that young master swore a knight's oath to you, and you've been allowed to be his friend?" Siren answered nonchalantly, "Yes, that's right." His voice suddenly dropped. "Siren, tell me the truth." Then he grabbed his son's shoulders and shook him repeatedly, tears welling up in his eyes as he yelled, "How can a smart kid like you be so delusional? Someone's been treating you badly, haven't they?" "Haven't they?" He was being shaken so hard he felt like his soul was leaving his body, but he still managed to say, "No, it's true." He hugged his beloved son tightly, sobbing his heart out as if it were a final farewell. "Oh my God. They say that people who go to a noble's house can never return? In one piece." Chiron's mother tried to pull her husband away. "Vincent!" Suddenly the door opened again. The butler's voice announced, "The young master and the lord of the house have arrived." Just then 3 people entered. Bishop spoke first. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. I am the master of this house." Bishop Ogenrian bowed slightly and spoke. "Hello. I am the sword of Siren Rian." Rena gently introduced herself. "And I am the eldest daughter, Rena. I've heard so much about you both." Witnessing this shocking development, the couple's faces turned pale, and both immediately bowed respectfully in response. "Hello. We are Siren's parents. Why would such great people as yourselves..." Hearing this, one of them asked, somewhat puzzled, "Oh my, haven't you heard from Siren?" Vincent, in a panic and with a trembling voice, asked, "Wait, were all those fantastical things the boy said actually true?" Even when seated at a luxurious banquet table filled with delicacies, he still couldn't believe it. No way, this can't be real. In the end, Vincent was completely zoned out, while Siren's mother was flustered. "Honey, there are so many plates." This continued even after the meal was over. He still felt like someone who had just fallen from the sky, his mind in turmoil. What in the world is happening? Meanwhile, his wife received a cup of hot tea and gratefully thanked the young lady. Vincent felt the suffocating atmosphere of the place. His mind felt like it was screaming, "What is happening?" His hand holding the teacup trembled so much he nearly dropped it. Even if I don't know what a knight's oath is, there's no way they would treat a commoner family this well. I need to get to the bottom of this. With that thought, Vincent spoke up. "Excuse me. I'm very happy that you think so highly of my son, but I'm also very worried. For a young master from a noble house like Ohen to swear a knight's oath to Siren, it's just unbelievable." Bishop frowned and said, "To be honest, I was a little uncomfortable with it as well." He continued, "However, for a militaristic house like Ohen, a knight's oath is absolute. If we were to discriminate based on status, it would tarnish Ryan's honor. Therefore, from now on, we will use formal language. Please do not feel uncomfortable about it. Our family will give your son our full support." Gamp burst out laughing and said loudly, "It's been a long time since I've heard you say something so right, son." Bishop was annoyed. "Oh, honestly, father," Siren thought to himself, as the head of the house who manages and decides all important family matters, the words decisive and proud truly suit him. Even though he struggled with the decision to take a commoner under his protection, he glanced over at Rena and saw her wink at him. He continued his thought as he saw Rian's bright smile. "But he isn't afraid of anyone." Bishop's expression turned serious again as he said, "To get straight to the point, your son is a user of the mental world. The mental world is not something that can be acquired through hard work. To be blunt, it is a true, innate
talent. He continued, "From what I understand,
The boy aims to become a mage. Therefore, if he wants to receive an unofficial mage license as quickly as possible, I am considering the Anfia's Magic Academy. One of the 5 most prestigious schools in the country would be a good fit for him." Bishop rubbed his chin and added, "I'm not saying he has to go to that school to become a mage, but not doing so would be a disservice to his talent, and I would not recommend that. Therefore, he should attend the Anfia's Academy to meet the standards of House Ohen." Gamp reminded him, "Consider their understanding of things, son." He glanced at Vincent's frozen expression. Bishop immediately understood what his father meant. He then got straight to the point. If your son graduates from a magic academy, he will become a mage. Only then did he understand, jumping to his feet. "Our son will become a mage?" Vincent thought, "A magic academy." His voice began to tremble. "It can't be. This has to be a dream, right?" "Our son," Bishop continued. "However, the biggest problem is his social status." Vincent flinched as he heard him awkwardly explain. "The Magic Academy is very selective, so they only permit the children of nobles to enroll." Gamp continued, "There is only one option." Then he stated seriously, "We will adopt Siren into House Ohen." Vincent couldn't believe what he had just heard. He could only stand there, stunned, his mind in chaos. "What?" Gamp resolutely explained their plan. This was the only option our family could agree on. He pushed forward a document. "I have a cousin who is still childless. If we add the boy's name to my cousin's family, all our problems will be solved. However, we have no intention of stealing your son from you. It is merely a formality on paper. But through this, Siren will become a nobleman." Vincent thought to himself, Siren, becoming a noble. How fortunate is he to receive an opportunity like this. But if I do this, it feels like my son is being stolen from me. He looked at his son with troubled eyes, pleading in his mind, "Tell me what to do, Siren. What should your father do?" Seeing his son's calm expression only made him more frantic. Has he already made up his mind? Just then, Siren glanced toward his father, his hand slowly reaching out to touch that large hand, the hand that had always toiled under the sun and rain for him. He then gripped it tightly, so much that Vincent felt a sharp pain. With a determined gaze, Siren loudly refused, "Absolutely not. I am my father's son. I cannot become the adopted son of another family." Hearing his son say that, he shouted in a panic, "Siren!" Rena, sitting opposite them, explained, "Siren, it's only a name. Of course, we'll still treat your parents as your real parents. You'll be able to achieve your dream and nothing else will change." As soon as she finished, Gamp spoke up. "You'll become a nobleman, kid. Opportunities like this don't come along every day." Siren remained firm and resolute, saying, "If I have to trade my father, I would rather live my life as a commoner." Gamp shouted in anger, "Commoners can't enroll in the Magic Academy." Siren replied decisively, "Then I won't go to the academy." The old man tried another psychological tactic. "Then you won't be able to become a mage." Bishop and Rena looked on, completely astonished. Siren insisted once more, "Then I won't become a mage." That statement left Siren's mother and Ryan frozen in shock, while Gamp became even more agitated and yelled, "Siren, why must you be so stubborn? This world isn't that easy. There are things you have to cast aside to succeed. If you can't do that, then is your dream just some childish fantasy?" He casually replied, "Perhaps it is, sir," which made the old man's head spin. What? Vincent, on the other hand, tears welled up in his eyes, which were usually full of passion and life. His dilemma and sadness were clear as Siren began to speak, "No matter how wonderful my dream is, it's something I received from my parents. If my parents are the roots, then my dream is the sweet fruit that draws nourishment from them." He recalled a past full of memories, standing shoulder to shoulder with my family, learning to read, and getting the chance to work at the Ocean House. These are things I achieved because my parents are my roots. This is just one opportunity I've earned. It's nothing compared to the countless opportunities my parents have given me. Siren let out a decisive laugh and said, "Telling me to deny my own roots now? Isn't that the same as telling me to die?" "I'm very grateful for your offer, but they are my only parents." Everyone in the room fell silent after hearing him speak. No one said a word. Glam was so stunned his eyes were wide open. He thought to himself, what is this feeling of guilt? No, what this child means is... Suddenly, Vincent bowed down and said loudly, "Please, adopt Siren. Please, I'm begging you. He was a little flustered. Father Glam, from a distance, said, I understand what you mean, but what Siren wants... He didn't care what the person next to him wanted to say. He just kept his head bowed and struggled to utter a sentence, Siren is not my biological son. After hearing her husband's words, Siren's mother was aghast. Vincent, what are you saying? He kept his head bowed and spoke. We can't have children. He explained, we came to have Siren through an unexpected event. I'm sure you can tell, but he certainly comes from a noble family. The boy is too great. Glam and Rena were more and more astonished as they listened. Vincent continued to pour out his heart. If he becomes the adopted son of a noble family, then he will return to where he truly belongs. So this isn't about abandoning his parents or denying his roots. Bishop thought to himself, is that really true? He looked at their family and understood. I'm sure everyone here has already guessed it. Siren looks completely different from his parents. He gently rubbed his chin, speculating, but those words, do they prove he wants to give up his son? Siren couldn't listen anymore. He was extremely agitated, grabbing his father's arm and shouting, Father, what are you doing? How could you say that without telling me first? His father could only avoid his gaze. I'm sorry, son, but you're older now. You had to find out eventually. Suddenly, Siren asked seriously, Father, do you really think I didn't know? That sentence shocked Vincent completely. His mood grew heavy as he struggled to say, The reason I never asked you, Father, is because people only have one father and one mother. I wanted that too. And now you want me to have 6 parents? He was so panicked, scared, and heartbroken that his voice faltered. I just don't want you to give up on your dream because of me. His tears began to fall. Siren shouted loud and clear, Who's giving up on their dream? As long as I work hard, opportunities will come. But he broke down, crying, and looked at his parents, asking, Have you ever thought about how I feel? Who would want to be abandoned by their parents 2 times? Vincent gripped Siren's hand, trembling uncontrollably. It's just everything I've done. It's all my fault, Siren. I will never abandon you. With that, he immediately pulled his small son into a tight embrace as if afraid he would lose him. A father's loving tears flowed like a stream. Vincent sobbed and begged, Please forgive this foolish father. You are my everything. They held each other tightly, expressing their feelings. Everyone around them was silent, witnessing the sacred and beautiful love of a family. As Bishop witnessed that scene, he suddenly realized something. The things we do for our children can end up hurting them. Glam replied, Being a parent is truly difficult. He asked, Isn't it hard for you too, raising your child alone? Bishop's eyes were already brimming with tears. He tried to hide his hand so no one would see him crying, and shifted his gaze to his son in front of him. Ryan was crying too. He was moved by the deep affection between Vincent and Siren. Suddenly, Bishop said, I heard there's a special consideration status at the Alpheus Magic Academy. I can help with that. Glam asked, puzzled. Huh? What can an old man like me do? How could I possibly convince that stubborn Alpheus? He said, Really? You can't? I heard he owes you a debt. Hearing that, Glam burst out laughing. Ah! For someone who abides by all the rules, isn't being stubborn the best method? Bishop chuckled as well and said, You use that same method to force me into becoming the head of the family, you know. He looked away slightly and replied, It was all for your own good. 3 days after Rien left for the night academy, the head of the house allowed my family to stay in Ocean. Dad still feels guilty towards me. I wonder how long he'll remember it this time. Finally, Ryan and I had some free time. We used it to sleep in together. He looked so happy, laughing with delight as he looked at his friend lying next to him. Listening to his stories, I also burst out laughing heartily. And then, 3 days later, we both had to leave home for the academy where we would pursue our dreams. Sharon turned his head slightly to take one last look. Just then, he heard someone sobbing. It turned out to be Ryan, crying his eyes out. I said, Ryan, don't cry. He replied in anguish. How could I not cry? Once we get in this carriage, we have to go to the night academy. We're really saying goodbye. The more he talked, the louder he cried. Why can't I enroll next year like you? Sharon replied, I'm not even sure if I'll get accepted under special consideration. Besides, we can still see each other during the holidays. Make sure you write to me every day, okay? Ryan suddenly placed his hands on my shoulders and called out my name firmly. Sharon! He yelled with all his might. You have to become a mage, and I'll become the strongest knight to protect you. I promise you that. Before he could finish, Xena landed a painful punch on his head. Just focus on graduating first. I'm more worried about you than anyone. Then she turned to Chiron and said, Chiron, don't you worry about a thing. Just go and have fun with your family for now. He will definitely help you get in. I quietly replied, I understand, and thank you for helping me, my lady. I placed my hand on my chest and bowed my head, expressing my endless gratitude. Xena smiled and thought to herself, what a strange child. At first, I thought he was just a cute little boy, but he's also very thoughtful. He was even able to hold on to his beliefs in that terrifying situation. She suddenly looked at me and spoke again. Chiron, maybe when you graduate. But then she didn't say any more, falling silent. She thought to herself, what am I thinking? He's just a child about to live in a completely new environment, the Magic Academy. Then Xena stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, no, just do your best, okay? You will definitely become a mage. I replied, please take care of Ryan. Then she pulled Ryan into the carriage, turned and waved goodbye to Chiron. I got into our carriage, where my parents were already seated. The mood was full of excitement and anticipation. The horses started to move. The two carriages went in opposite directions, growing further and further apart. As I sat inside, I suddenly heard a very loud shout from outside. Chiron! I immediately stuck my head out to see who was calling. It turned out to be Ryan Ocean. He was yelling towards me, when you get to the Magic Academy, make sure you surpass every last one of them. Hearing that made me laugh out loud. Then I, Sharon Arian, shouted back just as loudly in response, you too! And that meeting between two passionate young men would be remembered as the beginning of an event that would shatter the balance of the entire continent. By the side of the road, there was a nest of young birds. The mother bird had just flown back and landed beside it. Then it took off again, soaring high above, flying over magnificent castles with solemn architecture. This was the Althea's Magic Academy. A man set a teacup down on the table. It was Glam. He gave a tired, forced smile and said, You've been thinking for 30 minutes already. I trust the answer is yes? The other man, Alpheus, replied, Even though we've been good friends for 55 years, I really cannot accept your proposal. Hearing this, Glam shouted in frustration, What did you just say? Do you have any idea how much I struggled because of you when we were young? Alpheus said, This matter must be quite important for you to be spouting such nonsense. However, the special consideration category isn't a backdoor for nobles. We receive many requests every year, but this category has its own standards. The more he listened, the more irritated he became, scowling as he mentally cursed, This cunning old fox, making me wait 30 minutes for nothing. Then Glam burst out laughing. This time is different, you know. The old man looked a little surprised. It seems this really is important. It's been a while since I've seen that expression on your face. Glam smiled slyly and continued, I'm not asking you to accept some useless kid. It's the complete opposite. The boy is a friend of my youngest grandson. He's incredibly talented. Do you know what I thought when I met him? He said seriously. I thought I was looking at you in your youth. Alpheus, having just taken a sip of tea, raised a doubt. If he's that talented, why isn't he enrolling through the normal process? If that's the case, there must be some sort of problem. Glam, maintaining his serious demeanor, explained, There is a big problem. He's not a noble. Hearing this, the old man gasped, which in turn startled Glam himself. Impossible. Then, Alpheus described Chiron's appearance exactly. A child with blonde hair and blue eyes, you say? Glam recalled Chiron's earlier words. Even if it costs me my life, I won't regret being his friend. That was my first impression of him, he remarked. Such bold words. He continued seriously. I once thought he was a clever child who knew how to manipulate adults. However, after I offered to adopt him, this is how he retorted. If you told me to deny my origins now, it would be like telling me to find a way to die. Just remembering that is enough to make Gump cover his face and laugh out loud. Doesn't that make sense to you? Who would refuse to become a noble? Alpheus stroked his beard. He understands the natural law of cause and effect. Gump replied, That's right. If there is no cause, there can be no effect. However, not everyone understands this law, and they can easily lose themselves. A new opportunity can come at any time. But the moment a person denies their roots, they lose everything and can no longer decide what they believe is right. Does that remind you of yourself when you were young? Alpheus fell silent and didn't answer. A moment later, the old man finally spoke. The fact that they refuse to compromise means, and others may agree with what they believe is right, but those same people can also judge them. That's what I find dangerous. Hearing this, Gump clicked his tongue. Then he spoke softly, asking, "You still can't forgive yourself, can you? You've already done everything you could. You've taught so many talented people. Isn't it time you forgave yourself?" The old man chuckled and said, "For me to forgive myself? That would be too arrogant, my friend." Anpheus looked out the window and confided, "The reason I teach children is to prevent someone like me from ever appearing again." With a sorrowful look, the old man continued, "If that child is, as you say, like me, there's no guarantee he won't walk the same terrible path I once did, right?" Hearing this, Gump spoke up. "You were a genius, Anpheus, a once-in-a-century genius," he continued. "You, who were once considered the light of the Milch family, walked the wrong path just once and nearly lost everything. But in the end, you came back. Of course. Who would have known you'd become the headmaster of an academy in a remote place like this?" Anpheus immediately teased Gump. "What are you talking about? Then heaven must have been on your side. A talentless kid becoming an official third-class swordsman. I worry for the future of the Tamiya kingdom." Then they both burst into hearty laughter. The old man suddenly shot to his feet, then walked to the window to look at his school. "If there is no cause, there will be no effect." Gump poured more tea into his cup and said, "Is this fate? Who would have thought you knew that kid? The child who was cast out 4 years ago has returned." The old man chuckled. "I don't believe in fate." Then he thought to himself, "However." Anpheus thought of Sharon, a talent buried by the barrier of social class, wandering for 4 years and now standing before me. Is this truly fate? Finally, the old man announced decisively, "I will accept Chiron." 3 years later in the spring, a carriage was heading towards a small house deep in the forest. Chiron had finished getting ready, from his hair to his clothes. He called out loudly, "Mom! Dad!" Chiron Arian, now 17 years old, smiled excitedly. "I'll be back soon." Chiron's mother hugged him tightly, praising him endlessly. "My lovely son. I'm going to miss you so much." He promised, "I'll write often, but does my hair look okay? I've never worn it like this before, so it feels strange." She replied, "Miss Gina said that short hair is popular among the nobles right now. Just act normally." Over on the side, Vincent coughed a few times, a little embarrassed, and said, "Aren't you forgetting something?" Chiron waved his hands dismissively. "Dad, I'm 17 now. A kiss is a bit—" His father replied firmly, "Hey, if you don't do it, I will." Chiron let out a yell as Vincent gently placed on his young son's forehead a kiss filled with boundless love. Then he gently pulled him into a hug and expressed a father's feelings. "Chiron, I'm proud of you." Chiron also savored this warm feeling. Chiron then asked, "But is this really okay? The head of the family said he would give us a house." "Heavens, you—" Vincent replied seriously. "Your father is a hunter, right? A hunter's home is the forest, the mountains, and the fields." Chiron was startled, thinking to himself, is that really true? As he walked his son to the carriage, he said, "Even though I refused the allowance the Ocean family provides for you, they still insisted on giving it. Honestly," Chiron thought to himself, "this is a happy day for the village because I'm about to enter the Magic Academy, but Dad still hasn't told anyone. I'm sure the reason he refused the offer to live in the city is so he won't become a liability to me." Tamura was already waiting outside and spoke respectfully. "Please get in. We will escort you to the academy." Chiron got into the carriage, then stuck his head out the window and shouted, "I'll be back soon." And that's how my first day at the academy began. The carriage moved further and further away, leaving behind a couple seeing off their son who was learning to grow up, to pursue his dream. Inside the carriage, only Chiron and Tamura were present, making the atmosphere very awkward. When they arrived, he proactively opened the carriage door and called to him, "Young master, we have arrived." Tamura helped Chiron step down. His face clearly showed surprise and fascination. He continued, "This is the Anpheus School of Wizardry." The area was very crowded at this time. People coming and going made the whole area bustling. The school gate was tall, grand, and looked very noble. Tamura spoke up, "The cost of your study materials will be paid through me. Young master, all you need to do is focus on your studies." Chiron was incredibly grateful and thanked the butler for escorting him. The butler replied grimly, "I am only doing my duty." He bowed his head slightly, expressing his most sincere feelings. "I finally feel like I have a chance to thank you, sir. I was able to come here all because you saw potential in me. I will never forget what you've done for me." He smiled as he said the words he had always kept in his heart. Suddenly, a statement from the butler startled Chiron. No matter how talented a commoner is, they are still just a commoner. They can never surpass a noble. Facing him now was Tamura's stern and darkened face, but then he continued to speak his mind. However, not everyone is given an opportunity like this. After you join the academy, many nobles will look down on you. He smiled as he gave his advice, but you must persevere. If you can endure it until the very end, everything will be all right. A moved Chiron replied, "Thank you, sir. I will definitely become a mage." Tamura responded, "Now then, if you're ready, follow me. We need to get you registered for enrollment." And so, the two of them headed deeper into the academy. He thought to himself, Alpheus Magic Academy. In a place known as the Cradle of Geniuses, what will I learn here? And who will I meet? Inside, the guards shouted in unison, "We pledge our utmost service," bowing. The school grounds were filled with people who had come to fulfill their dreams, like Chiron. After finishing the procedures, Tamura instructed, "I'll be going now. If you need anything, please contact me." Chiron replied, "Yes, thank you so much, sir." But then he glanced around, wondering to himself, "Who's supposed to come and get me? Should I take a look around while I wait?" Suddenly, he noticed several long boards posted on the wall. The Alpheus Magic Academy operates on a 10-rank system. There are a total of 420 students. Among them, 30 are in the graduating class. Each year, the number of students who graduate is... Chiron was so startled his eyes flew open. "Only 10? Suddenly, someone approached and spoke up. "So this must be young Chiron." Hearing that, he immediately turned around. He instantly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, headmaster." Alpheus chuckled and said, "We've met before." "Do you remember me?" He spoke up. "Thank you so much for what you did back then." The old man patted him on the back and said, "It's all right. We can talk as we walk." Alpheus announced, "You will need to take an entrance exam." Chiron was dumbfounded, as he hadn't prepared for it at all. "An exam? But I don't know anything." The old man reassured him, "Don't worry, it's just a simple test to place you in the right class." Alpheus asked, "Can you access the spirit zone?" He replied, "Yes, sir." Hearing that, the old man exclaimed in admiration, "Oh, that's truly impressive." The old man thought to himself, "Who would have thought he could open the spirit zone on his own? If only I had started teaching this boy when he was little. I failed to recognize the talent right before my very eyes. It may be late, but I must teach him the fundamentals. The entrance exam hall will be filled with 10-year-olds, so if he arrives early, the boy might be embarrassed." And so the old man made a suggestion. "Would you like to take a tour of the school?" The two entered another area where a young boy was reading 3 books floating in midair. As the boy passed by, Chiron noticed something strange. "He just walked right past me," he stammered. Headmaster Alpheus explained. "This is a classroom where the students study." He looked up in amazement. "This is the freshman class, Class 18. This is the introductory class, Class 18. Many children were flying overhead and using magic, while he stood below in a daze. Those children were having a great time, passing books and playing with each other. A few were gathered to play games and eat snacks. Chiron looked around in fascination and then exclaimed, "Everyone's using magic," Alpheus said. "That's right. But where we're going is a bit different." They continued on to the advanced class, Class 74. It was very quiet here. Everyone was studying seriously instead of playing around. Chiron thought to himself, "The atmosphere is so different. Everyone around me is my age. What are they discussing so passionately?" A black-haired young man spoke up. "A large amount of magic power can lower the air temperature below freezing, but wouldn't condensing a refrigerant be more efficient? But the drawback is that the reaction occurs too quickly. What if we control the timing instead of the magic power?" Chiron was so shocked he wanted to scream, "What?" He was shaken by a painful realization. How can I not understand a word they're saying, even though we're speaking the same language? Suddenly, there was a loud explosion behind them. A girl stumbled out of the smoke, coughing. Upon seeing Alpheus, she quickly bowed. "Ah, hello, headmaster." Oh, he smiled. "It's all right. Looks like you've run into a little problem." The red-haired, bespectacled girl replied, "Yes, sir. I was experimenting with a way to amplify sound, but there was an error in the outcome." Chiron wondered to himself, aren't they concerned at all? Alpheus commented. It seems there's a slight imbalance between your input and output. Try checking to see if the flow is stable. She enthusiastically gave a thumbs up. Thank you, headmaster. I'll try it again. He was completely shocked. The headmaster isn't even stopping her? What's more, she's going to try it again? Shirin looked around with a bewildered and astonished expression, as if he had stepped into a completely different world. As the two continued their tour, a girl with long, flowing red hair glided past. It was Amy, a captivatingly beautiful young woman who made the boys nearby swoon as they watched her. The two continued to another room where something caught Siren's attention. Is this a notice board? On the wall hung a yellow board covered in letters. He looked at it and thought to himself, this lists the rankings for the entire intermediate class. At the top is Kemi. Isn't she a first-class noble? To be more specific, Amikamis. He stood there stunned, his expression frozen in disbelief. Everyone listed here is talented, just like me, but she's at the very top. A desire sparked and blossomed in his heart. I want to be like that too. I'll start learning all over again right here. A glimmer of hope for the future sparkled in Siren's eyes. Something urged him on, telling him he had to change his rank. Suddenly, a voice called from behind, Ami, wait for me! That voice made Siron turn his head curiously, wondering to himself, but could this Ami be Amikamis, the #1 student in the intermediate class? Suddenly, something made him freeze when he saw the red-haired girl. Her face made him recall a dark and terrifying past, a time when he was grabbed by some thugs. They were beating someone up, and their leader was Amy. Back then, she was like a crazed little demon, pointing straight at his face and demanding, where did you learn this magic? Why would a commoner? Back in the present, Amy just walked past him without a single word. But she suddenly glanced over at Siren. He immediately looked away. An orange-haired girl ran up from behind, calling out, Ami! I told you to wait so we could go together, you dummy! Siren, meanwhile, kept his head down, pleading internally. Please don't see me, please! And just like that, the two girls passed by. Serial looked back with interest and said, Did you see that? That guy we just passed. He's really handsome. Is he a new student? But he doesn't really look like one, does he? She wondered. Maybe he's a transfer student? This is getting interesting. I think I might have met him before, Amy said suddenly. Serial exclaimed, What? You're interested in him too? But I thought you weren't interested in boys, weren't you? She retorted, No, that's not what I meant. I just think he looks really familiar, that's all. Unconvinced, she shouted, Don't lie! You've fallen for him, haven't you? Amy firmly denied it. No, I never said that. That girl is Amy Camis, rank 1 of the intermediate class, the most famous girl there. She has rejected countless confessions from upperclassmen, underclassmen, and her own classmates. She's the model student among model students, but the only one who knows her dark past is currently trying to get into Alpheus. Serial asked, Are you cold? Siren, shivering, replied, No, I'm not. The third testing site of the Magic Academy. It was a sturdy and grand building. As the two entered, Alpheus spoke up, Oh my, it seems it's not over yet. The old man leaned toward Siren and said, This should be good. Watch closely what that child is doing. In the center of 3 circles full of magical symbols stood a child with brown hair. Above them were the examiners. Alpheus explained to Siren, When you enter the domain, you'll see that the letters on the wall are different. The way you perceive it will help us determine the size. Strength, flexibility, and inclination of your domain, the old man continued. Therefore, you just need to honestly answer the professor's questions. He replied, Yes, sir. His heart filled with excitement. This is so interesting. Sitting above, Thays called out, Sokami, can you use magic? The child replied, Yes, I can. The boy demonstrated his ability. I can lift things into the air. The man praised him. Well now, how adorable. Very good. Now try to enter your domain, Kami replied. Yes, sir. The boy closed his eyes and announced, I'm in. Thas asked quietly, What's the farthest number you see? The boy answered, 6. A professor smiled and asked, 6? Alpheus explained, The number 6 means the diameter of the domain is 6 meters. Siron took in the new information. Understood. A brown-haired man asked next, What color looks the strongest to you? Kami answered, The color red. I think I'm entering a red world. The man noted down, Divergent type. Like light and fire, this indicates a highly active inclination. Alpheus explained again, Divergent type means his domain is much stronger than his age would suggest. A female professor asked, Do you see a giant tower? Kami replied, It's on my left. It was Sienna's turn to ask, What's the temperature like? The boy replied, It's a little hot. I'm starting to sweat. When it was all over, she said, You did a great job, Kami. The praised child skipped away. Sienna remarked, This year's freshmen are truly impressive. Vass laughed and said, Indeed. That student's domain size is 12 meters. It seems the quality of students gets higher every year. In the end, they wrote down a final comment. Overall assessment, good domain control, but stamina is a bit lacking. Then they called his name. Next, Siren Arian. Anpheus put an arm around his shoulder, smiled, and said, Go on, show them what you've got. He smiled and replied, Yes, sir. I'll do my best. Up above, Vass stroked his chin and thought to himself, So that's the child who went through the special examination the headmaster mentioned. Sienna, for her part, was thinking to herself, What a peculiar choice. But he's also quite old. Borrowing the name of a noble house, isn't his family quite famous? The papers say Shiren Arian, age 17, a guest of a noble family. She thought to herself, it seems his talent was just discovered a bit late. Sienna looked at him and sighed internally. His appearance is certainly unique, but at this school, he'll be buried in no time. The man spoke up, asking, Shiren Arian, can you use magic? He replied, I can't. I've never been taught before. The man answered, Is that so? But even if you haven't been taught, you should still be able to do a few things. Anpheus frowned slightly. That's what they would think. Magic is the act of bringing forth the knowledge in one's mind. Noble children are taught many different things, and because of that, they can naturally use magic. But that child has no knowledge at all. The man said, All right, fine. Now step into the circle and enter your spirit realm. The man asked, You can enter your spirit realm, can't you? Shiren hesitated, then replied, I'll try. The man let out a small sigh of relief. What a relief. It seems this isn't a severe case of domestic abuse. On the other side, he was gradually entering his own spirit realm. A blue light materialized around him. A beam of light descended from above onto the crown of his head. The surrounding characters began to move and float. He opened his eyes to take in the scene, which left him stunned. So this is what it's like. The man asked the familiar questions. Now then, Shiren, tell us the furthest number. He paused, not answering, forcing the man to call on him again. Mr. Shiren? The brown-haired woman chuckled and said, It seems he's feeling shy. Anpheus, standing on the side, spoke up. Shiren, hurry and answer. We're not going to classify you. We're just trying to find the best way to educate you. He still hesitated, then explained his current situation. I see a number, but it's so long that I can't read it. The man was confused. You can't read it? It's not based on sight, but on what you feel. Shiren explained further, No, that's not what I mean. I can feel it, but it's just too long. It's even getting longer now. The man sighed and thought, Honestly. Then he frowned and said, In that case, just start with the first numbers. That you can see. Shiren focused, slowly looking at the result within his spirit realm. It was incredibly long. Looking at the numbers 3, 4, 1, 5, there was still a row of numbers after that. He summarized it into one number and answered, 3.14. The man was startled. What? Sienna, on the other side, was utterly shocked. Shiren, we did not put the number 3.14 in there. Are you mistaken about something? He frowned and replied, Is that so? But that's what I see. She thought to herself, Could it be? Of course, there are some cases where the ratio PI will appear. That means the size of the domain has exceeded the range we've set. Can he really see as far as 30 meters? The brown-haired woman asked, So, what is the strongest color you see? Shiren looked around and replied, Blue. It's completely blue. Once again, the professors looked at each other in surprise. If it's really blue, then isn't that a convergence type? But his spirit realm is still this large? A convergence type has better durability than domain size, the opposite of a divergence type. Anpheus, standing to the side, was also completely stunned. Now I understand why. You were so insistent about this. But this isn't just a good talent. The old man's eyes widened, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. They wrote 2 words on his file, convergence. Then they continued writing, both hemispheres. The old professor asked, How many numbers are floating around? Shiren looked up within his spirit realm and thought, Is he asking about this? I don't need to count them one by one. When I can feel it inside this place, there are so many shining dots. He answered decisively, 857. Hearing that, the man was so shocked his face went blank. He stammered, 867? Then he shakily wrote on the paper, density, 86.7%. Anpheus remained silent on the side, his face suddenly turning grave. This is dangerous. Sienna gently pushed up her glasses, her eyes a little wary. She composed herself and continued the examination. Chiron, how cold are you right now? Hearing the question, he replied, It's pretty cold. Enough to freeze me. She wasn't surprised and immediately wrote it down on the paper, as expected. Sienna wrote in the overall assessment section as follows. Convergence and defense with outstanding durability. The size of his spirit realm is abnormally large. The brown-haired woman smiled and praised, Very good. Now we need to have a meeting to decide which class you'll all be in. So all new students, please wait outside. Chiron obeyed, turning around with the other children to head outside. He led the way, pushing the door open and slowly stepping out. He waited for all the children to exit before closing the door. As soon as the door shut, the room erupted in excited chatter. What an interesting student. Exactly. How can a 17-year-old student possess a spirit realm with a diameter of over 300? The density of the spirit realm increases with its size, but that student's density is 86.7%. The old professor said, and on top of that, it's pure concentration, and without using any enhancement skills. What is he? Some kind of monk who trains nonstop on a mountain or something? Suddenly, a remark from Seven made everyone stop their discussion. Could he be lying? The man smiled mockingly as he thought about it. A spirit zone with 90% density and a 30-centimeter diameter, coming from a 17-year-old who knows nothing about magic. That's a bit absurd. Is it possible he inflated the numbers before telling us? Sienna frowned and said, It seems you've forgotten, Mr. Thaz. There's no reason for new students to lie if they manage to get into an advanced class that way. They wouldn't be able to keep up with the class, let alone pass the exams. Why would a student bluff like that just to get into the academy? On top of that, it seems some teachers here have forgotten that pi was displayed as an error code. Chiron is now sitting there smiling awkwardly among the children, she continued. That's not something an ordinary student would say, just to get attention. Thas, on this side, clicked his tongue in annoyance. Suddenly, Anpheus stepped forward and asked, So, where would be the best place for him? I mean, Chiron. She immediately shot to her feet. Principal Sienna Oliver, a level 6 mage, stated, The 6th-year class is learning about the development of the spirit zone and its theories, while the 5th-year class is starting to learn actual magic, correct? I believe this student's spirit zone is already near completion. Therefore, I suggest placing him in the 5th-year class. The man behind her stated firmly, I object, which infuriated her. Seven, the level 6 mage, voiced his opinion. He's a 17-year-old boy who knows nothing about magic. This could cause trouble and make him arrogant after being placed in an advanced class. For now, I think we should teach him from the basics. Sienna bluntly replied. That may be true, but not every student is like you, Mr. Seven. The man grew angry. What was that? And so the two launched into a war of words. Seven shouted, The only reason you want him in the 5th-year class is because you're in charge of it and you just want that student for yourself, isn't it? Sienna shot back, Is there a problem with wanting to teach such a talented student? A brown-haired professor said, Mr. Seven has a point. Even with his amazing talent, he's still a young student. So how about we teach him step by step, starting from the 10th-year class? The old professor next to him sighed wearily. There those two go again. The brown-haired woman said gently, He might lose his motivation if we send him to a basic class because of the age difference. What does everyone think if we just, postpone his class placement and observe him? The old professor spoke up. I think the 7th-year class would be suitable. The 7th year is an advanced class that also includes basic lessons on the spirit zone. If the kid is as talented as they say, then skipping grades is also an option. Anpheus rubbed his chin and replied, As expected, your words ring true. He didn't hesitate any longer and immediately decided Chiron would be placed in the 7th-year class. The Magic Academy has a system with 10 class levels. Based on an evaluation, students are placed into classes of 10 different tiers, but those classes can also be divided into 3 groups. Years 10 to 8 are for beginners, and students there are educated with a focus on developing their spirit zone. Years 7 to 4 are the advanced classes. This is where students learn how to use their magic and spirit zone. Finally, the graduating classes from years 3 to 1 undergo rigorous training to produce professional mages. The next morning, at the grand and magnificent school named Anpheus, a 7th-year class badge was pinned on the chest of a newly arrived young man. He immediately drew the attention of all the female students. They would always gasp in awe when they saw him. Chiron, carrying a briefcase, slowly walked into the classroom under everyone's gaze. The teacher in the class announced, "Today we have a new student." The female students below began to gossip. "He was placed in an intermediate class right after enrolling. He looks a bit old, doesn't he? But he's so handsome." Standing on the platform, he gave a radiant smile and introduced himself. "I am Arian Chiron. It's a pleasure to meet you all." The entire class immediately erupted with excitement. There were sounds of applause and cheerful chatter everywhere, mostly from the female students. They gave him a very warm welcome. The teacher had to ask for quiet. Chiron, however, was overcome with excitement because his wish finally had a chance to come true. "I've finally made it to the Magic Academy. Anpheus Magic Academy. The Anpheus Academy utilizes the entire 75,425 square kilometers of the mountain. Including the dormitories, it has 33 buildings and 40 training centers. Although going outside is forbidden on non-weekend days, it's not an inconvenience at all. This is because most facilities are located on campus. Classes end at 5 o'clock, and any time after that is free time. But students usually head to the school library, which is always open 24 hours a day. By connecting students with similar interests, it satisfies their desire to learn. All of these things are the driving force behind creating such a prestigious school. Chiron thought to himself, "As expected, the classes are difficult. There are so many subjects, and all of them are advanced knowledge. This place is meant for nobles, those who have been studying since they were young, and have gone through a long, difficult period with it. Because of that, I've faced many obstacles. However, by using every method I can, I've managed to keep up." The chronological knowledge of history became deeply ingrained in Chiron. All the knowledge of the world gradually began to accumulate within him. One beautiful morning, the teacher announced, "All right, that concludes today's class. Good work, everyone." As Chiron closed his book, he thought, the afternoon class is practical spirit zone combat, but the schedule doesn't list the location. Looking around the classroom, he felt a bit shy. "Who should I ask? Oh, good. There are a few people around my age." Chiron quietly approached and asked, "Hello, do you know which training hall we need to go to?" Startled by the sudden question, Maria jumped. "Are you asking me?" He thought to himself, "She's a shy classmate, huh? No wonder I feel so at ease." She replied, "You probably don't know yet. Today's practical class is at the 2nd Integrated Training Center." Chiron asked, "Integrated? Integrated what?" Maria explained, "All the intermediate classes will train together for 2 weeks. The orientation is today." Hearing that, he froze for a moment. All intermediate classes together? Could it be? The scene shifts to General Training Center number 2. Many students are heading inside, and the place is bustling with the sounds of chatter, laughter, and greetings. "Hello, Senior, thank you for last time." "Hello? Senior, please come sit over here," they said in unison. "Hello, Senior Ami. So she's the reason it's so noisy." Serial, next to her, also basked in some of the attention, waving hello to them. Chiron, watching from above, thought to himself, being popular is amazing. She's the kind of person I'd rather not interact with if I can help it. But there are 2 general training sessions every week. Even so, if she was already in the intermediate class from the start, she should be moving on to the graduating class soon. The seniors and juniors were chatting actively, but there were still strict rules. Chiron worriedly wondered, "Can I just be invisible here?" Just then, the special instructor for the intermediate field class, Etella Romet, a level 6 mage, appeared and announced loudly, "Hello, everyone in the intermediate class. I'm Etella, and I will be in charge of this class again this year." She glanced around before continuing, "I'm sure we have some students who have transferred classes since the new year, right? Even though our class is full of famous faces, so many of them. We have a new face joining the intermediate class today." Because of that statement, everyone looked towards him. So the rumor was true? Who is it? He could only force a smile and think, wait, this is dangerous. Etella added fuel to the fire. "Chiron, will you stand up and greet everyone?" He froze stiff, but still forced himself to obey. He swallowed, trying to gather his courage. Over on the other side, Amy and Serial were also drawn to look at Siren. He then smiled and began his introduction. "Hello, I'm Aryan Siron, and I've just started in Class 7. It's a pleasure to meet you." Before he could even finish his sentence, the whole room erupted in thunderous applause, welcoming him. Siren stood there, stunned, looking like he was about to faint. "I don't know what's happening anymore." Meanwhile, Serial excitedly said, "Amy, isn't that the guy you saw yesterday? It seems his name is Siren?" Amy, on the other hand, acted uninterested, thinking to herself, "This is the first time I've heard his name. Who is he? He seems popular. I'm sure I should know everyone like that by now." Suddenly, a brown-haired girl spoke up. "Senior, do you know him?" "According to my sources, the teachers are paying super close attention to him." Serial gasped, "Really?" The girl recounted, "They said all his stats were incredible when they tested him during the entrance exams." Serial replied, "Oh my, oh my. I like him even more now. I wonder which noble family he's from." That casual question made Amy suddenly freeze. Her eyes glowed a brilliant red, and her hair flew up around her. It was as if she had just remembered something truly shocking. It was a memory from the past, when she and a few others were caught in something like a tornado. Back then, she stared directly at a boy outside and demanded, "Where did you learn magic? How can a commoner?" And the little boy sobbing outside was none other than a young Siren. Back in the present, she was trembling, breaking out in a cold sweat. A forced smile appeared on her face. Damn it. The Camas family was famous for its bloodline of geniuses. The red eyes were a unique trait passed down to every descendant of the family. It allows the possessor to perfectly recall every moment they see. An arrow flew, hitting the bullseye precisely. Then, another arrow flew, splitting the first arrow already in the bullseye, and that made all her studies feel meaningless. The archer was a red-haired girl. Although she hit the bullseye many times, she didn't seem happy at all. In contrast, the butler standing beside her clapped continuously, praising her. "That's wonderful, my lady. That red-haired girl was the youngest daughter of the family, Ami, and also the most talented among her siblings." Ami's father laughed heartily. "My daughter." He placed a game piece down, saying, "A true descendant of the House of Camas," but Ami just stared silently at the board in front of her. The butler called out, "My lady?" Her father asked, "What's wrong, Amy?" With a cold expression, Amy stood up. "This is boring." She turned and walked away in frustration. Followed by a group of thugs, Amy thought resentfully, "I hate everything. Family, family, family. What does my ability even have to do with this family? I can make it, on my own, without relying on this family's name." She followed the thugs around, getting into fights everywhere. Ami thought to herself, "I can do whatever I want." Watching the thugs fight, Ami sat with her legs crossed. This is so boring. However, the one who surprised her and made her reconsider everything. Ami stared in astonishment at the thugs collapsed all around her and at the little boy standing opposite her. That boy was crying, his face covered in tears. The person who changed Amy's way of thinking was a damn lower-class brat. Back in the lecture hall, Siren was bowing to everyone. Amy watched the scene before her, the corner of her mouth twitching. She blurted out, Damn it!" Suddenly, Serial's voice called out, "Amy? Amy?" The brown-haired girl next to her also stammered, "Senior?" Both of them were confused. Startled, Amy explained, "I mean, my shoes are a little uncomfortable." Ami thought to herself, "I knew it. A memory scene with these red eyes. Can't possibly be wrong." The person next to her spoke again. "So, what were we talking about?" But Amy remained focused on her own thoughts. "I thought he was a noble." Ami looked at Siren. "But who would have thought he's actually a commoner? How did he get into this academy?"